Hey there, I'm world famous Poefred. You may know me from such things such as... Listen, I need a favor. Sonic fans are out there posting cringe again. I really need a place to rant right now. Because if there's anything the internet needs more of, is Sonic fans complaining about Sonic. Now, to preface, I'm not like other Sonic fans. Sonic fans are cringe, and I would never post cringe. If you find yourself cringing at any point in this video, you may want to see a doctor, because that may mean you're a Sonic fan. But now it's time to be serious. I'm going to get you all on my side by giving you an extensive history lesson about Sega's and Sonic's beginnings and their rivalry with Nintendo, so you guys know that I know what I'm talking about. So like, after Atari totally just killed themselves in the video game industry, they were like, oh no, what video games exist now? And then Nintendo was like, we exist now. So, because they've made Rob the Robot, a very obscure piece of tech that no one's ever heard of, but he saved video games by being a toy instead of a game console, but that let them basically get their own monopoly on the industry, because they were the only ones making video games that weren't bad. And then Sega was like, hey, we can make video games that aren't bad, but then they're like, we gotta compete with this Mario dude. How do we do that? All we got is this Alex Kidd guy, no one wants rock, paper, scissors. That would be cringe playing rock, paper, scissors game against Mario, who choose that? And then Sonic came out, they made Sonic, and he's like, yeah, Sonic's cooler than that Mario guy. And then the ads were like, Sonic, faster than you. And then Mario be like, Mario, not Sonic, boom. And Sonic be like, well, I don't cost as much as you do. And they had a big old battle. Then they went to the Olympic Games, I guess. I don't know. You all know this stuff, come on. Okay, now that you guys respect me for knowing such obscure knowledge, I can safely say any controversial take I want. I like Sonic 2. Sonic Blast on Game Gear hasn't aged all that well, honestly. Oof. Watch out for this one. Sonic Adventure 1 is quite enjoyable. We're getting a little spicy here, but Sonic R's soundtrack is a masterpiece. Sonic Mania sucks. Now, when we're talking about Sonic, there's a lot to clarify. There's such an absurd amount of baggage everyone has with these games. Whether they're a casual fan or have completely gone off the deep end, I think it's important to lay it all out there and explain where I'm coming from, because personally I'd say most Sonic games are quite good. There's very few I find no value in whatsoever, and a good portion of them are very fun. Most of the time with the more divisive ones, like say Sonic Heroes for example, I find there's just a bit of a learning curve a lot of people don't want to go through. I don't want to come out here and start trashing on one of the only universally well-received games in the series, because I find Sonic games have like the most bad-faith critiques thrown at them out of any series out there. To the point where even Sonic games I'm not really a big fan of, I end up defending anyway because people's issues just don't make any sense to me. But something about Mania has people completely entranced and like almost completely blinded. This isn't gonna just be some blind hatred for everything this game does. I just want to give this game the analysis a lot of people seem to not give it. To start positively, I get the appeal. The aesthetics are amazing, the music is phenomenal, it's a very stress-free game. If you just want to like sit down and relax and just play a game with very nice visuals and like bop to the music, I totally get it. The bosses are more creative than the original trilogy tended to be, and the deep-cut references will make longtime fans happy. Mean Bean Machine popping up as the boss to Chemical Plant was easily the most hype I'd felt for a Sonic game in years. What Mania needed to do was deliver what people remember liking about the classic games. But there lies the problem. It's based on what people remember liking about the classics. People remember being flung into the air in Green Hill Zone in Sonic 1, or the extreme speeds they hit in Sonic 2 for the first time in Chemical Plant. That's stuff that sticks with people. But the problem I have is that Sonic was always more than that, but Mania tends to just be nothing but that. It feels like it's trying to recapture the same energy non-stop, and it just doesn't work that way. The old games are so much more. Sonic 2, for example, has a very clear difficulty curve, and every level was crafted with intent behind it. Sonic 2 does what it needs to do and then moves on. It doesn't just dilly-dally around with worthless long levels that don't do anything. If you're a beginner, you can explore and get extra lives that'll help you a lot and later in the game, but if you want to, you could just rush past it in less than 30 seconds and be on the more fun levels, leading into Chemical Plant, which is the level that I feel like a lot of Mania stages are kind of trying to replicate, because you get there and it's like, wow, Sonic can run faster than you've ever seen him before, which was a big deal at Sonic 2, coming off of Sonic 1, of course, but literally like 30 years later, like, come on, do something else, you know? Because just as soon as a chemical plant gets to its second level, you've got this noob trap that is like pretty effective against newcomers. A lot of people get stuck here, and a lot of beginners will like finally get out of it and then be super satisfied and be like, finally I got past that bit after dying repeatedly, and then they end up falling into the next pit and then have to do it again but underwater. Then they'll probably drown, and like eventually if you keep up with it, you'll be good at it and you won't struggle with it at all. But that's the thing, there's something to overcome there. Act 1 showed you the speed you can reach if you're good at the game, and Act 2 showed you it won't always be completely free. You have to actually get good at the game. And then in the very next zone, it like takes what it showed you with water. There's a pigeon on my AC. Aquatic Ruin takes what you learned with water and makes it into an entire level. Like, if you are careless / bad at the game, you'll just fall into the water and have to just suffer down there for a while, play the whole level underwater. But if you know what to do, you can skip the water altogether. You don't even have to touch the water, and it's really satisfying to get on the highest routes on this stage because of that. The contrast to playing the level above the water and playing it below the water is massive, and like it makes replay value huge. Even when you've mastered the game, it still takes execution to do, and you could always get better and better, and it's just always satisfying. And the whole game builds upon itself like this until the very end. And for the record, Sonic 1 also had a pretty solid difficulty curve, by the way, and it got way more difficult than Sonic 2 did, I think. But to be clear, this isn't an issue of difficulty necessarily. With me, Sonic lives or dies on replay value. If a Sonic game is fun to replay, probably to an unhealthy degree, it's a great game. If I enjoy my first playthrough but find it less and less interesting the more I play it, I'd rank it lower. Generations is a very easy game from beginning to end, even for beginners, and I'd say it's one of the best in the series still because of just how fun the levels are to replay over and over again, even to this day. Now, Mania starts off decently, really just copying the exact same structure as Sonic 2 actually, Chemical Plant Act 2 having the noob trap and everything, except now the noob trap is in Act 1, which isn't really an issue, I guess, but what's Act 2? Oh, it's the most mindless and automated level so far. This is the start of what I call Mania's Rube Goldberg machines, and it's the core issue I have with a lot of the game. So often the level design just falls back on being a marble machine, where all you do is watch Sonic roll through a bunch of empty tubes and hallways with little to no input required. The main mechanic of this level, I guess, is these syringes. You just jump on them and then the goo under them changes to be more bouncy. See, Green Hill Act 2 had this cool zipline gimmick that directly engaged with your momentum in a satisfying way that rewarded skilled play. The gimmick in this level, on the other hand, you poke X, then you poke Y, now you're in the next part of the level. It really doesn't get any more interesting than that. You've got these sticky purple walls that are just uninteresting to use. You just jump on them and then press jump when they take you where you need to go. And where you need to go is usually into a bunch of dash panels, springs, or tubes that lead you into more tubes that spit you out into a dash panel that spit you out into a syringe that makes the floor beneath you bouncy. So you walk off the syringe and bounce upwards into a downward slope and watch Sonic roll down and get launched into a purple sphere that carries them upwards to where you need to go. It's just too much. Short transitions between set pieces have always been a thing in Sonic games. They're basically in all Sonic games, and I don't really have an issue with them inherently. They're quick, sometimes flashy ways to get you to the next part of the level design in a controlled way, but when it starts to feel like the transitions are a replacement for gameplay, then they become an issue. And of course, there's a huge difference between playing a game casually and speedrunning it, and that goes for just about any game, but I will try to go into both if I think it's relevant to my issues with the level. And normally the speedrun aspect is what would drive me to enjoy a Sonic game long term. I started going for record times, pushing my PBs down in this game, and the time trial mode is so good that I feel like it should be standard for games outside of the Sonic series. Being able to instantly reset with no delay at the press of a button is amazing. I just found that for most levels, I hit a skill ceiling way too early to really feel like improving. After just a handful of attempts, the levels began feeling limiting. And the ironic thing is what feels limiting is that the levels are designed to make you go fast. You're already going extremely fast with no effort casually on your first run. The effort to go faster hardly feels worth it. Some levels are definitely more fun to replay than others, the game's a bit of a mixed bag for sure, but a majority of its levels just hit an expiration date after only a relatively small amount of playthroughs. So I guess all that's left now is to go through each level and briefly explain what I thought of it and why it just doesn't hold up on repeat playthroughs to me, or why it's quite decent for the few I actually like to play. Okay, literally over half a year later after writing this intro, I'm back with some footage. Yes, it took me that long to feel like playing the game again at all. Unfortunately for me, my hard drive filled up while I was on the final level while doing my run for the game, which corrupted my video file. So I had to start over again, and I figured this time I'll do it on PS5, because if I'm gonna play it again, I might as well get some achievements or something. Which was a bit of a blessing and a curse, because now I have even more to complain about. I feel like I have to do yet another playthrough just to get some usable footage of me playing these stages. The special stage grind is real. The amount of Blue Sphere stages this game wants you to do for completion, combined with all the special stages you're going to do for the Chaos Emeralds, just completely kicks Mania's pacing in the teeth straight out of the gate for anyone wanting to 100% the game. I already found the little bonus stages attached to Sonic 3's checkpoints to be a completely worthless waste of effort, but now there's 32 Blue Sphere stages attached to them. Honestly, I wouldn't even mind it. I find the later levels of Blue Sphere to be way more engaging and interesting than the actual levels are in Sonic Mania, but why did they have to use the exact same stage layouts from Sonic 3 and Knuckles? There's literally millions of Blue Sphere level layouts. I was already sick of the first handful of Blue Sphere levels in Sonic 3 before Mania even came out, due to some various hot takes I have about how Sonic 3 and Mania do their special stages, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. Anyway, as though this game's wanting to flaunt how much of a wasted concept it is, your reward for getting perfect on every single Blue Sphere stage is the ability to play a new version of Blue Sphere with new ball types that have different effects. This is just nasty. Them reusing Blue Sphere levels instead of picking new ones was bad enough, but only after you've 100% the game does it let you play a new version of Blue Sphere with new mechanics. Just look at my playthrough of this level real quick. It's absurd. This is literally 10 minutes of footage, and only 2.5 of that was spent outside of special stages. Anyway, sorry. As I said, time to get into why every single level in this game is absolutely abysmal from beginning to end. First on the chopping block, Green Hill. I quite like this zone. They did a really good job at introducing both Sonic in general, as well as some of Mania's unique quirks. This feels like a natural evolution of Sonic 2's level design, with interconnected pathways, fast upper routes, and slower, more dangerous routes if you're careless and fall into the bottom paths. Especially Act 2 shines, and I'll just say this right now, it is the best level in the game by a long shot in my opinion. And something I'll be bringing up a lot is level-specific gimmicks, and in this level, there's these zip lines. This is a fantastic level gimmick for 2D Sonic, as they directly interact with your momentum and reward you for keeping up your speed while running into them. If you fail to hit them at a good speed, then they won't really take you anywhere. They might not even move, or they might be extremely slow. But if you hit them really fast, then they just launch you through the whole thing, and it's really satisfying. You just get blasted out the other end, and it's great. And not only the zip lines, but the whole level feels pretty alive. There's pathways connecting all over the place in every direction. There's breakable walls, good use of verticality without sacrificing the open nature, which is genuinely pretty rare for the series. There's even a small use of water, interesting slope shapes, it's all great stuff. Now, where I'm less impressed is in the boss fights. I wouldn't be that hard on these two because they're at the beginning of the game, you know, but it's a kind of consistent issue with the game. Because despite me saying they were pretty creative in the intro, most of them feel entirely wasted. I already didn't even like Act 1 bosses in Sonic 3, and they're honestly just as bad here. They're so worthless that they don't even make up for the fact that they get rid of the satisfaction of running through the spinning goalposts at the end of the level. A high speed, high energy level ending in a satisfying... No, just have the sign slowly float down from the sky after a mediocre boss whose optimal strategy is to get hit on purpose and use iframes to tear it down in seconds. The bosses in Sonic 1 and 2 weren't some masterclass in boss design, but especially Sonic's 1 bosses tended to feel like it was possible to lose. The first boss in Sonic 1 makes you jump on these two platforms near the side, so if you get hit, you're likely to flat out lose a lot of the rings because a lot of them will fly off the side of the screen. Again, it's not a hard boss, and if you know it's coming, you can get some easy hits on it, but there is an actual fail condition and design that makes that condition possible to reach. Mania though, the boss just comes down to you and lets you wail on it, and you'll be in the middle of the screen as it does, so losing rings isn't even an issue. And unlike the Wrecking Ball boss from Sonic 1, it doesn't move out of the way at all, so getting hit doesn't even make you have to readjust your positioning or anything. It's just kind of sad. And seeing Death Egg in Green Hill shows Mania is going to be a little more wacky than your usual Sonic game, but in practice it may as well have been a normal enemy encounter. It's so pathetic. Again, it's not necessarily about the difficulty. Like most of the bosses in Sonic 2 can be easily cheesed, but you usually have to go in with some knowledge beforehand to be able to do so. Timing a jump to get the easy kill on Chemical Plant Robotnik is nothing special, but it's something. Game knowledge plus execution with the chance to fail equals some sort of design. This is just nothing to me. It may as well not be here. You just repeatedly jump into him mindlessly and then he dies. But that's about it for Green Hill. I love the stage, but the bosses are the start of a constant problem. Now, on to the next absolutely abysmal, soul-crushing dumpster fire of a level. How is Mania's Chemical Plant? It's pretty good, actually. At least Act 1. It's basically just Chemical Plant, which is a fan favorite for a reason. It's got a lot of upper paths to go on if you're paying attention and have some game knowledge. It's got the classic slopes, it's even got the noob trap I praised in Sonic 2 to up the difficulty before the game starts getting more demanding. The only flaw is they didn't copy the fact that Sonic 2 didn't have a boss at the end of Act 1. This is just another boss whose optimal strat is to jump into it while it's invulnerable and use your iframes to finish it off pretty much faster than the fight even began. Act 2 though, this is where the game shows its true colors. The level gimmick here is that you have to touch the syringe. It makes the floor under it bouncy, so what do? You touch syringe, then you bounce. And then there's these purple things on the walls, you just jump on them and they take you to the next section and you press A. These two mechanics are already a far cry from the excellent ziplines from Green Hill. They're a completely binary, worthless interaction that gets copy-pasted repeatedly throughout the level. They only serve to shove you through to the next automated section, one after another. The game doesn't stop with the automation in this level, it genuinely plays itself almost 100% of the time. And the few spots where input is needed are relegated to just poking the syringes or jumping off the purple goo. There's this one bit where you can jump early to save like 2 seconds, which is the kind of design this game could have used more of. Literally anything that can actually turn momentum into satisfying gameplay scenarios would have improved any section of the level. Now when I talk about Mania being automated, I find a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about. They say I'm making things up, cherry picking or whatever. So like, I don't know, just like, look at this footage. I don't know what to say other than the level design really takes a massive nosedive here. And this is far from the only level that suffers from this kind of design. There's a few alternate paths, like, kind of littered all over the place, but just like Sonic Forces, that doesn't really help. If what is inside those pathways is automated and boring and stupid anyway, then it doesn't matter how many there are in a level, it's still bad. But I can't be too mad, this level does end in a Mean Bean Machine reference. I mean, not even just a reference, it just turns into Mean Bean Machine, meaning it just turns into a much better, more engaging, well-designed game. I'm just glad it's here. It just makes me happy that this is a boss fight in this game. It's real funny, it's a great reference, good stuff. Obviously, they couldn't make it that interesting because, of course, they couldn't assume that you know how to play Puyo Puyo. his difficulty level is set beyond below 0. So ultimately it's kind of just a boss that kills itself, but it's fun enough to where I'll let that slide, honestly. Mean Bean Machine Supremacy, rise up. Mean Bean Machine Gang, rise up. Gang, gang, rise up. Mean Bean Machine, check out my combo. Studiopolis is the first original stage, and they did a great job coming up with new aesthetics and music here. Lots of moving parts and small details, but I gotta be honest, I really think it's one of the worst zones in the game. I'm going to try to be a bit thorough in discussing the alternate routes in levels like this that do attempt to have them. I don't think I'll bother giving a play-by-play of every level after this, because I think it'll just end up being really repetitive and annoying. But just to portray the issue as clear as possible, here we go. So you run straight ahead, and the entire level past a few small jumps at the start completely play itself. Once you jump over this enemy, it springs into a slope that just goes on for a while. Throwing you into a spring that pushes Sonic towards more empty slopes. Leading to more springs into a car that turns Sonic into sound waves, and you just watch it take him to the next section, which spits him out above a spring that throws him into a sloped ceiling, into a stretch of nothing but a loop. Jump down here and it's just a long drop that flings you up the whole side of the building. You just wait for these platforms to break so you can be shoved through a loop, bounced up to a spring, kill a single ineffective enemy, and you hit a spring that throws you up here, where all you do is jump on the bouncy ball, hit a spring, and the level's over. I feel like this route's self-explanatory. Like, I'm not the only one seeing this, right? Like, ooh, hype, new original level, love the music, OMG, looks great, But when does the level actually start? I just watched Sonic roll around a bunch of empty slopes for a little over a minute. What's the point? But like I said, alternate routes time. I was actually getting into speedrunning this one at first. Timing a jump to go through these two bumpers leads to a whole section floating above the level that's very cycle dependent. I kept replaying it and trying to get through it fast enough to warrant staying near the start of the level for so long versus just running ahead into the automation. It was pretty interesting and way more high effort and potential high rewards, as it leads to a faster upper path that gives you some speed shoes you could bring pretty far into the level. But it seems like I was trying too hard, because on a whim I found out if you just walk to the left at the start of the level, there's a red spring that skips the entire section I just mentioned trying to climb. Like, why? Why design a higher effort, faster route, and then just make it even easier to reach than a slower route you get by running forward? And the path itself, as far as level design goes, is really not much more impressive than the first path we looked at. A lot of empty running forward. It does branch here. If you miss this jump, you end up on a lower section, and it's really just kind of boring down here. You can find 2 ring boxes, whatever, I don't care. Step on this chair and wait for a platform to move over for you. Watch popcorn pop. Jam Sonic into a television and we're back on the main route again. While we're here, I'll show you that you can skip the second braking floors and instead come up here through noticing a moving platform. But there's nothing wild up here. There's just a fire shield with 10 seconds in the stage left that you'll probably lose instantly being blindsided by this cheeky lad anyway. Okay, let's go back and see. If you jump over this gap, you actually do get to where you want, the speed shoes. You can skip this little falling platform by jumping a bit early. It's a bit faster and kind of satisfying. I don't know what the point of this slope leading into a spring is, but it's there. Anyway, it just immediately lets you out at the end of the main path back to this section again. And here you can see if you don't jump over this car like I did last time, it just takes you to the end of the level. Even while I'm not trying at all, it feels like I'm trying too hard in this level. Also, I managed to hit the spring behind the car when I went into it so I could jump and make the screen twitch out during the transition animation. Also, I really don't like how these bumpers' physics work. They never feel quite right. I keep trying to use them to get pushed forwards, but since they're technically moving to the left, it seems like no matter how I hit them, I get pushed left. This level is a bit more difficult to discuss than it was to talk about like Chemical Plant Act 2, because at least in Chemical Plant, I could point at like stupid level gimmicks like the syringes that didn't really do anything for me. You know, and I could just say like, yeah, they copy paste this over and over again and it's never fun. On top of the bad level design, that's just all automation, you know. But Studiopolis doesn't really have anything. It's just all empty slopes and automation. But I can't just come out here and say the level's empty. Like, people would just laugh at me and not take me seriously, and it doesn't really tell you anything. But I feel like if you just watch this level, or even go play it yourself and like honestly really think about what's happening, nothing's happening, generally. Anyway, the boss fight is kind of tedious. It goes for something a little different than we've seen before in this game, in that it's longer than 5 seconds long, but 90% of the fight is just running along an empty path with nothing happening anyway. It's so badly paced and your time in it is entirely RNG dependent. You just have to poke these blue rockets instead of the red ones, and the only thing making this remotely difficult is the fact that for some reason in this fight specifically, Sonic's jump is nerfed. You can physically feel and see him hitting like an invisible wall in the middle of his jump arc for some reason. It just feels kind of bad, and I guess it technically makes the boss more interesting than it would have been otherwise, because jumping over this one overly telegraphed thing is all this boss even has going on. Not as bad as the bosses before it, as there was an actual attempt and dying is technically possible, but it's still awful and just serves as a pace breaker. At least we get to hit the goalpost like normal this time. Kind of an empty gesture since we've literally just been running down an empty pathway for a full minute beforehand. Anyway, I'm sick of even talking about this level now. Thankfully, future zones will have more tangible things to talk about, instead of just being a bunch of slopes, though they do often suffer from the exact same issue. Oh yeah, this is only Act 1. I do have to talk about Act 2. How's that one? Uh, It's all just more of the same. So the game just shoves you up to this upper path, and I wanted to do a test to see how fast both paths were. The path on the right takes more effort to go to, as it doesn't literally just automatically place you in it. And yes, you can see from the footage, absolutely nothing is happening in the path. It's entirely devoid of any actual level design. second run, I went up where the game suggested I go to start with and get met with a special stage ring, a bunch of the same automated slopes, and I reached the spinning reel 10 seconds faster. Could have made the gap smaller by getting into this a bit faster, but I also got hit on the other path. I don't know, whatever. Both paths are mind-numbingly boring and lead to the same place within give or take 10 seconds-ish of each other. Whatever. Okay, I actually really do like this bit though, being thrown into the air here, and you have to bounce across the 3 enemies and onto a platform that falls if you're too slow. It's stuff like this that shows the game does understand what would make 2D Sonic interesting. This is momentum-driven platforming with the reward of a different pathway for succeeding. You only get one chance to get it. Okay, that's awesome. And you get up here and the pathway is off to a decent start as you have to time your jump to go inside these spinning bumpers and then hit them just right to get out of them. But almost immediately the game just regresses back to more of this. Alright, so say you don't make your jumps up here, what's the lower path like? Like, I can't believe this. This is just pathetic. I feel like an infant whose uncle is trying to keep them entertained by jiggling some keys in front of my face. That's all this game is. Just hang a TV with this footage playing over it over your baby's crib and it'll be an endless stream of vaguely interesting movement. Just drag Sonic all over the screen haphazardly and people will think it's a high-energy, exciting level apparently. I mean, look at this. This is just an Auto Mario level from Mario Maker. And, those seem to be really popular, actually. I guess that's just what kids are into. Again, if you're just playing this game to have a chill time, grooving with the music and enjoying the aesthetics, just having a flashy game to sit down and relax to for a bit, I get it. What I don't get is people genuinely lying to themselves and saying this is anywhere near being a competently designed Sonic game, let alone one of the best in the series. Also, I hate this guy in particular. He's fine when he's used as an obstacle to jump over, but when you can't jump over him, it just feels random whether or not you break through his defenses early, though it is pretty satisfying when it happens, to be fair. Anyway, the boss is over before it begins. He has this gimmick where every few seconds he turns on a different weather effect, but he flies too low to even get to do more than one of them before he dies, as long as you have the timing to hit him when he just dips down a little bit. Actually interacting with the weather is sorta cool. Hitting him because the wind pushes you up and grabbing onto the pole to not hit the spikes up top is pretty satisfying. He's got this attack where you have to get in the right position directly under him to avoid getting damaged by the sun. And sure, if you could only hit him while he's doing the weather effects, maybe the fight would have had some pacing issues, but at least it would have been an actually memorable fight to an extent. But as it is, he's just over with almost no effort before you can even do anything. Well, we're on to Flying Battery, and this one's a little interesting as it's the first Sonic 3 level in the game. And I'm gonna be complaining about it, but it's not all strictly negative this time. And I'm gonna be honest, so Sonic 3's level design I've never really been a huge fan of. It's kind of a much more generic platformer obstacle course type stuff, a lot more flat with a focus on platforming and sacrificing the multi-layered top and middle bottom routes, seen in something like Sonic 2, in favor of having bigger scale levels that have more verticality to them. It's actually the Sonic 3 levels in Mania that really started to make me tired of speedrunning them first, because the routes on your first run are generally going to be the same as your 20th, because there really isn't much to speak of for alternate paths. That said, coming off of just how bad Chemical Plant and Studiopolis were, this level is genuinely pretty great. If you want to speedrun it, that is. And that's only because there's a hidden fire shield near the start. Utilizing the movement this shield gives you optimally and also keeping it till the end of the stage is genuinely pretty challenging and rewarding. You can cut down the level completion time pretty substantially doing this, and it's something I feel like I could actually get better at and find satisfaction in doing. Casually, the level is mind-numbingly boring because not really much happens. It's not as automated as previous levels, though it does have its moments. I just think a lot of Sonic 3 level design is like automated in a no thought goes into progressing kind of way, and less of a Rube Goldberg machine type of way, if that makes sense. There's a bit at the start above a bottomless pit that's kind of tense, especially if you want to go fast, but other than that, it just feels like you're going through the motions. And especially on repeat playthroughs where you're just going through those same motions again. The electric shield attaching you to the ceiling doesn't really add much, you just walk along them. Enemies aren't even all that interested in you. There's a bit here where if you hold left, you get to the route that comes up here, or if you miss it, you get the route that quickly spits you out at the exact same spot anyway. I do like this bit here, it's pretty satisfying to get through it clean, a brief decent use of the core mechanic of momentum as rare as these moments are. These spinning fans do nothing for me. I've seen a lot of people think you have to time your button presses on them to swing the right way, but no, Sonic actually just goes in the direction you're holding no matter where he is in the spinning animation here, all at a set speed too. Pretty lame. I like this bit where if you jump off the spring just right, you can float above these two fans to skip them. Pretty satisfying. But I think just by describing the alternate outcomes here, you can see how Sonic 3 stages tend to be a lot more straightforward. What you see is what you get. I couldn't go 5 seconds without having to go on a tangent about what if scenarios in Studiopolis, which sounds like Studiopolis would be the more interesting level, and to an extent it kind of is casually, but like I said, the route where you have to take the fire shield as far as possible is actually really rewarding, and it single-handedly saves an otherwise middling level where not much happens. The only thing that's a little frustrating outside of the boredom of a casual run is this bit where when you get here you don't really know whether the electricity is on or off until you get up to it, but the gap's big enough to warrant spin dashing blindly into it. Feels a little lame to get hit by the bottom, and really lame to get crushed when you just try to jump over it because you anticipated it being down and it crushes you. Obviously it only takes like 2 seconds to check in the first place, and it's not really an actual problem, just kind of an annoying spot in the speedrun. Anyway, the boss is stupid and it practically just kills itself. You can kill it a little bit faster by bouncing on the little emojis it spawns in, but a few seconds later the garbage at the bottom is high enough to just repeatedly jump into him. Kind of kills the tension of a boss that will kill you if you don't beat it fast enough, if it almost literally kills itself before you can reach that fail condition, but at least the early kill on it has some gameplay to it, so that's something I guess. Act 2 is a weird level. It's kind of just more of the same, a bit more of the automated segments I'm referring to in some paths. I don't know, I think my problem with this one is how binary your path through it has to be. It's hard to put into words without sounding stupid because basically I'm complaining about a route being optimal in a speedrun. I guess it's just because the route feels like it just skips the level effortlessly. There's a few spots for satisfying jumps and you do weave around the level fairly satisfyingly in a couple spots. Specifically this bit where you can risk doing a double jump over the bottomless pit to save the second you would use to break the ball first to make the jump safer. But again, any spot with these spinning poles is just a bore. You just move slowly to the opening and press jump. It doesn't change. I like this bit where you can jump to hit the top first to skip having to slowly slide up, but generally all use of this mechanic is just kind of repetitive and boring. The level ends up flinging you up to this path where it kind of just meanders about with samey level design. A lot of just going through the motions again, following the moving fans, holding the direction the monkey bars want you to go, standing on these things until they spring up, a dash of automated speed here or there. It keeps using the spider thing that grabs you and moves you 2 inches over some spikes and drops you. One of these moments you can skip with a well-timed jump, that's satisfying, but the rest of these you just have to sit through. Like, why? Doesn't really do much for me, and the speedrun outside of a couple jumps is pretty unsatisfying, as it's almost entirely just knowing which route to take to play less of the level. Oh, just go this way instead of that way, and suddenly the level's like a minute 30 shorter even with poor execution. It just feels kind of arbitrary. Like, going to either one of these paths is equally as effortless. They're completely separate from each other. The entire appeal of multi-layered pathways in, say, Sonic 2 was that if you messed up, you'd fall and go to a slower path. But here, when you get flung up, if you miss holding right to go to the top path, you go to the middle path, which is faster anyway. I don't know, the level just kind of drags no matter what route you take. The only positive about this level is some of the jumps you can make with the electric shield, but it's nowhere near as fundamentally game-changing as the flame shield was from the previous level, so it doesn't quite save the speedrun from being much more interesting than the casual run anyway, which is to say, not interesting at all. And I'm sorry, but you know for a fact if the game looked like modern Sonic but was otherwise exactly the same as it is now, people would absolutely trash on this game for level design like this. In Sonic 1, the loops in Green Hill were an actual physics obstacle. They were a speed check. The entire idea was you earned your momentum to do a uniquely Sonic action like running through the loops, which at the time tied directly into the appeal of the gameplay. So yeah, it used to actually mean something. Even something as basic as running through a default loop used to mean something. But now I guess we just do whatever we want. Like, look at this, who cares? It's a fun little roller coaster. But hey, let's be fair, there is another route that lets you skip this horrible section by doing this instead. Waiting for Sonic to sink through a bunch of garbage, that's what this series is all about, I guess. Woo. Now the boss is actually amazing. Love this spider lad and the fan character that spawned from it. You can't physically damage him on your own, you have to hit the big bumper that makes up his whole body with enough force to hit him into the spikes on the side. It actually makes really good use of the spinning poles, as well as the spin dash and the fact that you can keep tapping him to keep him lowered to prepare to hit him at the right moment. This bit where it's a little cramped with the spikes, but there's enough room to spin dash into him and hit him anyway. A higher risk that speeds up the fight a lot. You could totally miss or go blasting yourself straight into the spike wall, or maybe even do it too early and get crushed by the spikes. And like, since it's so cramped, the timing for the jump is very demanding as well. This fight embodies everything Mania could have been, a really unique idea that takes a common Sonic concept, in this case the bumpers, and turns it into a really cool fun boss that's all about utilizing your momentum to beat it. Definitely one of the best bosses in the whole series, I think. On to the second completely original stage, Press Garden. It has a good start, very linear but has a few satisfying maneuvers, like when you can hug the wall to the left here, so that when you bounce off the thing at the bottom, the spinny thing above you will shove you back down like immediately really fast. Even the drop dash is pretty satisfying to use here, because in such tight spaces like these, it's actually timing and positioning dependent instead of just being completely free like in more open spaces. Some decent platforming ideas with these spinning plates where your position on them determines whether it's worth riding them, or if you'd be better off jumping to a different position or jumping off of them entirely. You could bounce off this rabbit to hit the button on the roof that spawns the platform to take the upper route. You don't have to do this to hit the button. If you did, I'd probably praise this a bit more, to be honest, but it still feels good to do. And the level is full of small satisfying things like this, and they do build up to a level that feels pretty good to play. These big metal cylinders you start falling off of are satisfying enough to jump back to the top when you're falling down. A few of the breakable objects feel nice. It's a pretty pleasant level that doesn't overstay its welcome too much. Not all of it lands, like they use this setup twice, these elevator bits where you have to get out fast enough to not get crushed, but the only way that'll happen is if you literally fall asleep while playing. The level design flat up gives up at the end here. There's a higher path up here that only exists to hide an achievement, and there's nothing else here beyond a dead end, so that's kind of weird. A lot of the alternate paths don't really do much for me. They're very separate, just like the one from Flying Battery. It just comes down to one of the paths skipping portions of the level. Once you know the lower paths are faster, well, that's it. There's no real execution to taking these paths, you just do. And a lot of the time it doesn't even have any unique level design attached to them. Here you kind of just skip parts of the level. The first one has an extended unique section to it, but really not a lot happens down here. It's pretty empty feeling. But if you nailed the intro segment leading into it, it does feel good to have a moment to run down a path like this. It's nice for a speed section to actually feel satisfying for once, instead of like other levels where I'm just numb to it because that's all the level has to rely on. It's overall a pretty respectable level. The boss fight is the epitome of just damage boosting to win though. Do they really think anyone's going to sit here waiting for it to hit the right kind of box to stun itself to get a couple hits in when you could literally just mindlessly jump into it and kill it in seconds? Okay, Act 2 though, I do not remember being this great. Playing through it just now, I was surprised by how much fun I was having all around. The speedrun is satisfying, casually wandering through it is still engaging enough, pathways are all interweaving and connected. This mechanic where you turn into an ice block is surprisingly well implemented. It's both used as a hazard and an aid to your momentum, which I think is a big part of why this level is satisfying no matter which you're going for. If it's casual and you're not really trying to go as fast as possible, the ice is still a hazard that you have to avoid, but if you're going faster, you can use it to your benefit. Shaking 4 times and then waiting until the perfect moment to shake a 5th time to break out, which preserves your momentum you had in the ice block, it's satisfying every time. There's walls you can only break while you're inside the ice block, so the idea is you have to slide into it with the ice block. It's good stuff, and I love finding the fire shield and destroying all the blocks around me. There's even this part where you can fire dash into some ice spikes, breaking those spikes, and then standing on top of the spikes underneath it, and you have to jump to the next section before those ice spikes you're standing on shatter from the fire as well. And I know I've praised the music already multiple times, but the music in the stage is in such a unique style and sound for the series, so it really stands out in a soundtrack that's already full of iconic songs and great remixes. Even the boss is enjoyable. If you hit him in the air, he gets stunned, but whenever he jumps, he throws a ninja star, which are actually these little starfish lads from Sonic 2, which is the kind of creative use of an existing Sonic concept that I love to see out of this game. But if you try to jump into him when he's on the floor, he freezes you and you have to break out. Fun boss concept with decent execution, and before I move on, I don't want to understate how much fun this level can be. It gives me a brief glimpse into what people see in this game. Since the way different paths cross and lead into each other is so complex, it makes speedruns of this stage beautiful to watch and pull off. It lets top-level speedrunners truly flex their skills and mastery of the stage, as opposed to something like Flying Battery Act 2, where even the best speedruns don't even look a whole lot different than a relatively casual run, due to how rigid the different pathways are implemented in those stages. Okay, now Stardust Speedway is a very intimidating stage to go about discussing. I mean, look at this monster of a level map. So I'm gonna put it off for a bit to give you guys a small break from my whining about level design. Now's as good a time as ever to complain about how Sonic 3 and Mania do special stages, specifically how you enter them, since I actually do like a lot about Blue Sphere and the new 3D ones from Mania. But in Sonic 1, CD, and of course Knuckles Chaotix, never forget Knuckles Chaotix. To enter a special stage, you have to have gotten 50 rings and taken them to the end of the level, and jumped into the ring behind the goalpost. This method of entry to the special stages directly encourages getting better at the levels, which ties into the replay value that Sonic at its core is built off of. Sonic 2 changed it to put special stage entrances above checkpoints if you run past them with over 50 rings, but I'm not quite as big of a fan as this method conceptually, but it worked for that game specifically. It's the first time Super Sonic was available, and you couldn't even save your game, and the half-pipe special stages were a bit on the trial and error side. This let you get 50 rings and visit each and every one of the checkpoints for special stages to get Super Sonic much earlier in the game than you could otherwise. I personally never do this. I don't like bloating Sonic 2's excellent pacing with a bunch of special stage attempts, but it's conceptually an okay solution to Sonic 2's specific needs. But I absolutely hate the big rings hidden in walls that Sonic 3 introduced. It trades the idea of skilled play being encouraged and instead encourages you to bash your head into every vaguely sus wall trying to find them. And once you found them, well, now you know where they are, so doing them on repeat playthroughs is simply an obligation, especially since now you're more obligated to do them than ever before, since Sonic 3 and Mania hide their true final bosses behind having Super Sonic. Not only do they remove the emphasis on replay value and increasing your skill at the game by turning them into just random hidden collectibles, I don't even think they do a good job at making exploration very fun in these games either. If I'm exploring in a Sonic game that saves, therefore lives do not matter, I want to find interesting routes, something that adds some wrinkles to the smooth brain that is Sonic Mania level design. Well-placed speed shoes, invincibility, or an elemental shield that works in tandem with the level design to give you a faster playthrough early enough in the stage for it to matter. Or most importantly, some interesting level design at all to sink my slimy gamer thumb teeth into. It just feels like a wasted effort hiding 48 of these things in stages. Like, cool, I found some of them, and now the rest are worthless to me. I know they give you plus 50 rings if you already have Super Sonic, but I honestly could not care less. This game already bores me to sleep before I start using God Mode to ignore even more of its design. Getting easier access to using that God Mode honestly just removes the one caveat Super Sonic even has in the first place, as though the game needed to get any more mindless. I'd really rather they just appear after any level if you've kept 50 rings to the end. Though I say this, forgetting Mania feels the need to have a boss fight in every single act, so maybe this wouldn't work in this case either. I don't know, whatever, they're basically just dead content to me at this point. Oh yeah, I was supposed to be giving you a break from the whining. I don't know if any of you care at all, but if you're this far into the video, maybe you'd like to hear my history on the series, I don't know. I guess skip to this time if you really could not care less and just want to get back to the Mania analysis. But having an intermission to help us bond more might be nice instead of this video just being 2 hours of me spewing my brain onto you totally raw. Gotta come at it like you're training an animal. You're on one side of the door, I'm on the other. We both begin to mutually accept each other's presence in this house, get accustomed to each other's scent, you know how it is. But yeah, Sonic 2 was one of the first games I'd ever played, right next to Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, Jak and Daxter, and most importantly, The Jungle Book on Super Nintendo. Literally some of my earliest memories of existing back in the year 2000. And despite being huge on Sonic 2, I never really got the chance to explore the series further for quite a while. I didn't even beat it till like ages later. I don't know if I just got unlucky and never saw another Sonic game on the shelf as a kid or what. Maybe they kept Shadow the Hedgehog on the high shelf, it being a man's game and all. I did have Sonic Adventure 1 on the Dreamcast for a while, but one day the Dreamcast just disappeared and my brain was so small I didn't even realize it. Turns out I guess the story was my dad was fascinated by the hardware and opened it up for some reason and couldn't get back together or something, I don't know. I distinctly remember one day my mom coming home while I was playing Sonic and I just screamed like I was dying and then just slammed the console to turn it off. To this day, I have no idea why. It's not like I was grounded or anything like that. Something about Sonic I didn't want to be seen playing anymore for like literally no reason, I guess. I was like 4 years old at most at this point. I really didn't even have much experience with the series until Colors came out on Wii, and I rented it from Gamefly. Felt so smug, as I really hadn't even heard anything positive about Sonic until Colors came out. Like, ha! My superior taste in video games allowed me to skip straight to the first good entry in a decade. Which is hilarious in retrospect, considering how much my opinions have drastically changed since then. Otherwise, it was really the Xbox 360 that my love for the series really sparked. Back then, retro games on digital stores were priced so generously. games ranged from like $5 to $10 usually. It was really a different time. I convinced my younger sister to split the steep cost of 800 Microsoft points with me so I could play SA1 again. Eventually got Sonic Generations for my birthday and my role in life was sealed. I played that game to death and slowly began accumulating every Sonic game on the Xbox 360 and afterwards every other game on every other console. I finally beat Sonic 2 for the first time, never could do it as a literal infant. By the time the follow-up to Generations came out, which was Lost World, I had already played and beaten like every mainline Sonic game for the most part. Hardest part about that whole experience being grinding the chores for those fabled Microsoft points. I helped my friend's grandparents move out of their huge house into a bigger house and used like 100% of the money they gave me to buy Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric on Wii U. I was in too deep. As releases slowed down, my dreams of a follow-up to Generations slowly kind of just shriveled out though, especially when Forces came out, and I enjoyed my first playthrough well enough, but it was just a very brief distraction at best, to say the least. I honestly have a lot of positive things to say about like 95% of Sonic content. It's a shame to me, even as someone who's such a huge defender of the series, that I can't say much good has come out in the last like decade. But hey, maybe Frontiers will end up surprising me and I'll be making videos about how great it is next month or something. I really hope I do. And side note, to ease back into the complaining, I really don't understand the Plus DLC. It making the title screen like 2 seconds longer every time you boot up the game is more annoying than any worth it actually adds to the game. Mighty and Ray are added in, and I guess level design is slightly changed, supposedly. Not really in any substantial or noticeable way, honestly. You kind of just play the game again with usually an uglier color palette. Mighty himself doesn't really bring a lot to the table, he just slams down and bounces off spikes. I like that he's here, but his Knuckles Chaotix appearance is way more interesting considering he's the fastest character in that game and can grab onto walls and use them to launch himself upwards. He just doesn't have that in this game. Ray's more interesting as he has a gliding mechanic that's fun to use, given you're in a level that's more than just watching it play itself, of course. And that's really it. It's only $5 and I guess that's worth Mighty and Ray coming back, but they honestly don't leave a huge impression on the game, and the Mania mode just feels kind of superfluous. It's not the worst DLC for Classic Sonic you can buy for $5 anymore. They've really lowered that bar as far as humanly possible, but I just don't get it, like, at all, honestly. Alright, let's knock the second half of this game out. I'm going to be criticizing at least Act 1 a lot, but I'll fully admit this is just one level my brain may be too small for, and I definitely can't go super in-depth on it because, again, first off though, some easy things to talk about to introduce my point. These bomb bag plant holder things from Sonic CD spawn these carnivorous plants, and you're supposed to use their leaves as platforms to progress, and it's never not really boring. There's this one you can either hit the spring and be in the next section, or wait for the plant to grow, walk over here and use the leaf to get to the same spot. Like, why would you use the plant ever? Thankfully, most of them, including this one of course, are optional, which is great because there's actually a lot of them and they're all really lame. Getting a good shot out of these cannons is really satisfying, but that kind of gets into my problem with the stage, in that going fast in it feels like the equivalent of button mashing in a fighting game. Like, generally, you really have no idea where to shoot yourself to get the optimal speed, but it sure is satisfying when it happens, and the fastest routes through the level aren't really based on any kind of multi-tiered structure like in Sonic 2, where skilled play puts you on faster paths. It has you going all over the place. I think why this level doesn't quite click with me is that the casual playthrough of it is pretty boring. I already mentioned the plants, but having to spin dash on these wheels, or grabbing the pulleys and being pulled to the top, or just holding the right direction to progress in these tube sections that are otherwise entirely automated, none of it does anything for me. This is a level I can definitely understand having an enjoyable speedrun in if you're willing to commit this to memory, but casually it's not all that engaging and kind of overstays its welcome despite only being just over 2 minutes long. So again, the point is that while a high-level speedrun is pretty complex and enjoyable, the level is only fun in that specific context, as otherwise it's filled with more completely empty interactions that pad out the length without adding anything meaningful. Without the challenge of sticking to a route in a level as complex as this, all that's left is all those empty interactions and empty slopes. And the boss is just a worthless default enemy that was already spammed in the stage. It just spawns in, and then you kill 3 of them, and then a big one spawns in. You hit it a few times. After this loops 2 to 3 times, you win. Woo! Act 2, though, honestly works a whole lot better for me. It's basically the exact same type of level, with the important difference being is that a lot of the boring stuff is removed. No spin dashing on wheels, no pointless pulleys, no plants to wait on. So the fun of a speedrun is still present in a casual run. It's still not my preferred type of level design, again my brain may just be too small for it, but I do prefer the idea of being good at the game equates to you getting to faster paths that are easier to fall out of, over almost just pure memorization. Hey, if I could do this... like Darkspine Sonic can or whatever, it would be a blast, but I'll just have to admit that one's beyond me. But like I said, that's not really a huge issue in this act, as it's still fun before you memorize it. It's faithful to the source material and is overall pretty enjoyable. To add, I mostly just think this act does a lot better at interweaving its pathways. You never really feel stuck on an extended route, and every run feels fresh because it really takes advantage of the insane level design, as opposed to Act 1 where multiple runs can feel very similar to each other. The Metal Sonic boss really could have been better. It's a 3-phase fight starting with a race, except it's not a race this time and you kind of just run down empty pathways while he occasionally tries to attack you. It's not very effective. Not sure why they didn't just go for a race here. Would have been inherently more fun, I think, because as it is, it's pretty barren in design, and Metal himself doesn't have much of a presence. Maybe they felt like the race thing was overdone with Metal Sonic and tried something new, which I could appreciate, but they kind of did something new by just removing Metal Sonic from the race portion of the race segment. Like, I don't get it. The second phase is entirely just RNG. These little silver dudes spawn in, and if they spin dash, you spin dash into them, then they hit Metal. If they don't spin dash, they bounce around being worthless for a bit until they do. It's a fun reference to Chaotix and Game Gear Sonic, but that's really all it is. The third phase was actually originally so bad that they patched it. In the original version, there was this big spike wall on the left, and you had to repeatedly hit Metal Sonic until he died. Problem being, if you got hit, you and your rings all slid to the corner of the spike wall. You'd pick up all your rings and proceed like usual. It was literally harder to die in this than it was to win. Thankfully, they replaced it with a really good boss taken from Knuckles Chaotix. They definitely did this fight justice here. You have to hit its core without getting hit by his hands, while also being chased, and if you fall behind, you fall off and die. Genuinely, it's a pretty challenging fight, and I'm glad this update saved the whole fight, because originally it was literally just 3 phases back to back of nothing going on. Now's a good time to mention the lack of logical level choices as far as difficulty balancing goes. It's not a constant issue, but we're over halfway through the game and here we are with Zone 2 from Sonic 3. Maybe it's just because the typical idea of water level equals hard, I guess, but like pretty much all the levels from Sonic 3 and Mania, it's very straightforward. It has some alternate paths though. In fact, it starts off with a choice of 3 pathways, and there's some nuance in that choosing to go upwards leads to an above water segment that's faster but takes a roundabout way to get to the same spot the middle would have taken you. And it's got this one jump that if you fail to make, you'll fall back to the middle path, having made the whole scenic route pointless time-wise. The point being that the middle path is underwater, but strictly makes progress in the level. More dangerous, but theoretically faster route. This is a fairly interesting setup because the faster paced route is actually slower than the slower paced underwater one, since the faster paced one actually takes you to the left, and the slower one takes you to the right. But it falls flat, honestly, because the middle route isn't really very effective at being more difficult, nor does it fully commit to being slower, really. Parts of it still just funnel you into a hallway and push you forward as fast as it can with no effort. It's pretty much just this hallway with a couple easy jumps to make to avoid the spikes, so it's really not that interesting. And as you saw from the footage, the top path is just more of Mania's automation. And to be fair, in this case, it is ripped from the original source material, but I didn't really like the source material to begin with here. The bottom path, I often forget's even in this level, feels just as lame and it's pretty redundant. It's harder to avoid every hazard in this path, yet it's slower than going down the middle one anyway, even if you execute it perfectly. Also, these hands that hold Sonic in place while he revs up to full speed. I'm going to be harping on these a lot in Act 2, but in general, I really don't like how they're used. But this first one actually teases a good use for them. Initially, I thought it would be faster to pull back on the momentum of the speed it gives you to take the bubbles up onto this ledge, instead of following through and having to use the bubble to slowly float over. But then my dreams of remotely interesting game design were crushed as the bubbles don't actually lift you anywhere close to high enough. So that's pretty lame, and it's the closest thing to interesting these hand lads get, so look forward to seeing them more often. But yeah, hit a red spring, fly underneath some spikes that have no chance of hitting you, and you're at the end of the middle pathway slower than if you just take the middle path from the start. Anyway, this has already gotten pretty long for what's really just a pretty boring level. The issue I have with the first three paths being redundant and lame kind of carries out throughout the whole level. Like here, you can go through the extra effort to climb these moving platforms, dodging the bullets in the process, to a higher level and take the boat across to drain the water and progress. Or you can just ignore the pathway upwards and drain the water and skip that whole section where nothing happens anyway. So just like the intro path choice, what's actually inside the pathways is completely boring, and your decision doesn't matter anyway. There's one way, and it's the easiest way to go, and that's the objectively fastest way through the level, or you can just go through this roundabout scenic route where you stand on a boat under some spikes that can't hit you to get to the same spot. Like, why? What's the point? I guess if you've been on the top path from the beginning and you're still on the top path, it does lit up around this area, so technically you do have to actually choose to go down instead of continuing to go up there. I don't know, I don't really care. I just keep replaying the level and feeling like I get arbitrarily faster times just because I took a different path. Like, instead of taking the boat, you can just come down here and get a bunch of free speed in this entirely empty section that ends up skipping one of the more major tedious sections in the level that really drags on. Like, I could just ride this bubble all the way back to the surface, but ignoring that and just shoving ahead ends up finishing the level surprisingly fast, skipping this entire exhausting section with the bubbles that would normally be at the end. It's like kind of frustrating just how long I have to talk about this level due to how many pathways it has. But bottom line is that they're not implemented well, and that what's inside of them literally puts me to sleep. I'm recording a little extra here just to give a bit more detail. This is the room I'm talking about here. You've got two choices. You go up with the bubble, which takes more effort, or you just mindlessly go through and just continue playing the level completely straight. Turns out, yet again, the path of least resistance is the fastest path. Just like earlier on, you're really most likely to take the fastest path on this, not even thinking. Unless you're trying too hard to, like, try. If you're actually putting effort into playing this game, then you're rewarded with some tedious bubble sections here. Like, look, it just keeps going. I hate this section, it's exhausting. It doesn't help that by nature of going through this path, you've already gone some roundabout way that makes this stage take an extra like 2 minutes or more. It just keeps going, and at this point I'm just falling asleep. But yeah, just choose to go through this route instead, and you'll have a much faster time skipping pretty much all the bubbles. It's just like that path in Flying Battery I was talking about. It's not, oh, you're better at the game, therefore you're getting on better pathways. It's you just choosing a path and hoping it's not horrible. I mean, they're all horrible. I hate every path, but one of them's way faster and gets you through the level quicker just because it doesn't waste as much time with worthless filler sections. The boats range from entirely pointless to making you have to take a single step back to dodge a spike. These hands pick you up and shove you at full speed. It's got multiple lengthy sections that just play themselves both above and underwater. There's hazards just randomly placed in ineffective spots that seem to only be there, so there's a smaller chance you'll realize the room is entirely empty. I kind of like the idea they went for, assuming it was intentional, that staying underwater in this level actually leads to faster clear times just because of how the level is structured, and that of course means you'll have to deal with the threat of drowning if you're not careful throughout the whole stage. But does anyone really enjoy the repeated use of the bubble? It would be fine as a one-off thing, but this level just chains them together, on top of nothing really being interesting about the stage otherwise. So yeah, really the only positive I can say is that since the underwater paths are the fastest paths, you'll have to deal with the threat of drowning the whole level, like I said. That is, of course, if going to the left upon starting the level didn't give you a bubble shield. I don't know what's up with these Mario Maker dev routes in some of these levels, but they're pretty cringe. When you're not in time attack mode, Eggman actually blows up the support beams of the level and the level starts falling. But really, it's probably one of the lowest energy action set piece, oh my goodness, Sonic run, oh no, he has AirPods in, he can't hear you moments in the series. The one with the wall coming to crush you from the left in the actual Sonic 3 is a lot more interesting. Or gee, even that level in Sonic 4 that was based around that idea was better than this. The boss is kind of funny, as you're in Eggman's pod, he's usually in for every single fight, and you have to slurp him up and damage him and avoid the bombs he puts down while he's in the water. But the fight really just plays itself if you have any sense of timing whatsoever. The hitboxes are extremely generous in your favor. I genuinely don't even know what it looks like if you get hit in this boss. Just ends up being a goofy idea that translates into a pretty slow boss whose engagement levels flatline as soon as you figure out the controls of press anything to slurp. Thankfully, Act 2 won't be as long to cover because the instant you start the level, it gets straight to the point. It's gonna be one of those types of stages. It's got a few of those really boring pace breakers that only really exist so the level can pretend it has something resembling design put into it, like these spinning cylinders. I just don't see the point. Like, look at this interaction. Is this fun? And they use these all over the place. At the start, if you're completely asleep at the wheel, you'll fall into the water, which I did for the first time out of curiosity for this video. And there's these bits where you grab the bar and move Sonic into the position and let go, and dude, this is just the fan poles from Flying Battery again. Except this time even lamer because you have even less control now, so it really is truly just a worthless interaction. And generally, it's just more of the same of what's above water. Hand grab Sonic, blasts him ahead at full speed. This level cannot help itself. It cannot go 10 seconds without putting in a section identical to this. There's two satisfying bits that let you take a higher path, said paths not having anything interesting or unique going on that you wouldn't find in the other paths. But going back to hit the spring to get to this moving platform in time to hit the cycle is satisfying enough, and this part where you can use the momentum from jumping off the wall to reach the upper path. Like I always say, it's jumps like these that this game should have been designed around more often. breaking the streak of mindless automated speed by letting you take control of it, and with good timing, you reach faster pathways. If the actual paths themselves were going to be so automated, they could have at least done more to make getting into each path more satisfying like this. But this is the exception really, as the rest of the level just plays out like this, one after another, non-stop. Throw in some pointless fan sections just like the previous level and a boss fight where you're essentially just waiting for it to beat itself, and you've got another really bad stage. It's kind of tempting just to stop and commentate over the entire level to really hammer it in, but I think the footage should speak for itself here. Is this boring to watch? I feel like showing you this level makes this video worse because it's so boring to watch, but that's what it's like to play the level. Imagine playing this level like 50 times. No one's doing that. I mean, a lot of people are. The people play this game all the time. I don't know how many times you could go through this level without losing your mind, but I guess people do it. Like, this level's not even trying to hide it. It's just the same automated section copy-pasted repeatedly until the level ends. There's almost nothing of worth in this level. It's all automation. Anyway, yeah, here's that first part of that boss fight. Like I said, it's just literally waiting for him to kill himself. It's so boring. Oh, there's a button above you. Press up to go to it, and press it. And then he takes damage. Repeat until he dies. There's no mechanic. The second phase of the boss is more interesting. I do always like bosses in classic Sonic that have slopes on both the left and right walls. Killing it fast is fairly difficult, and hitting it can be satisfying using the slope momentum on the sides. But really, it's kind of just a copy-paste of a Sonic 3 boss. One of the better Sonic 3 bosses, to be fair though. Must be why they made this a two-phase fight, because this phase was too decent, so they just had to put a full minute of basically waiting for it to start just to even out the bad to good ratio. Anyway, you drain the water, run off screen, and somehow Sonic's on his plane because they added level transitions even though the game was not made with them in mind, just because Sonic fans begged for them. Mirage Saloon is interesting as it has two Act 1s. As Sonic, it's really just another Sky Chase from Sonic 2, and I really think it misses the point of why Sky Chase works in Sonic 2. In Sonic 2, it takes place right before the final level, in a game that, as I said at the beginning, really doesn't stop ramping up its ideas and challenges, culminating to 3 acts of Metropolis Zone. At this point, having a short intermission with a somewhat relaxing but tense flight to the final level has such a bittersweet feeling to it. It works to give the player a break from a potentially exhausting set of levels, and also acts as a build-up to the final level as you fly to it. Sonic 2 doesn't have stage transitions, but Sky Chase between Metropolis and the final level does a lot more for me than really any of the transitions between stages in this game. Like, ooh, they saw flying battery after running around in some TV world and then they jumped onto it, cool, like, I don't care. But why doesn't this concept work in Mania? Realistically, the levels are essentially the same thing gameplay-wise, but for one, this just doesn't have an ounce of the narrative attached, really. Narrative referring to a player-game relationship, I mean. Just randomly in the middle of the game thrown in after Hydrocity, an extremely tame zone that largely plays itself. Like, wow, I can't wait to take a break from the game playing itself to sit in a slow auto-scroller. And it ends up being about twice the length of Sky Chase even. Because where Sonic 2's would have ended a little after 2 minutes, Mania has this train section, and it just screams missed opportunity. I would have much rather seen a Sonic level that takes place on the back of a moving train. Too bad it's a section that ends faster than it even begins, with nothing of interest to note about it. For some reason, the edge of this little platform launches you forward with fake momentum like it's Sonic Forces. They do hide a special stage at the very beginning if you make this little, like, vaguely precise jump here. But yeah, it's over so fast with so little design, I don't see the point in it. In Sonic 2, the thing you fly in front of is the final level, and like I said, that's a cool build-up that serves multiple purposes in the game. But in here, you fly in front of a train that you're on for like 10 seconds at most? Why? Then you've got a boss fight that, to be fair, is kind of satisfying to beat without missing any attacks on him, largely because the depth perception on him is kind of on the weird side. You have to jump a bit earlier than you'd naturally think, in my opinion, but like I said, it does feel good to beat him fast at least. But if you don't beat him fast, it's pretty tedious, as you have to just keep waiting for him to jump at you, and he's not really made to be a threat as far as his ability to kill you. So at the end of all this, it's just Sky Chase, but with all of its weight entirely missing, a wasted train idea, a potentially tedious, semi-confusing boss that's kind of satisfying to hit. If you go fast on the train and the boss, the level clocks in almost twice as long as Sky Chase, and it just really doesn't feel worth it. And the high-energy music, while great on its own, also really doesn't fit the vibe of a slow-paced auto-scroller. It just seems like they missed the entire reason someone might actually like Sky Chase from Sonic 2, to be honest. And just to really harp on this for a second, I'm going to show you a bit of Sky Chase Zone, because I genuinely love this level. Like, the music that plays through it is so great. On the surface, if I said I didn't like the one from Mania, but I liked the one from Sonic 2, I feel like a lot of people are going to be very confused by that. And they'll be like, they're just the same thing. But, like, the emotion that the music alone gives me is so different. It's not just nostalgia, obviously that's part of it, but the where this is placed and how it's used is so much more intent filled. It's filled with intent, you know? It's not just here as a random reference, you know? The level that came right before this beat you down, and it was a shock to a lot of people to find out that that level had 3 levels in it, when normally this game only had 2. So 3 levels of what a lot of Sonic fans consider actual torture, you know? But this level acts as like a cooldown moment to reflect on the journey up until that point, as well as a hype, like a build-up, like an ominous build-up to the level as you fly in front of it in the background. It's really effective. In a game that doesn't really have much, if any, story, really, it's able to say so much through so little. Compared to the one in Mania, where it's got the music popping off in the background like it's some high-energy, exciting level that takes place after a level where you stand there waiting for it to progress multiple times over and over again. Like, it's such an easy level. Hydrocity, you know? Like, whatever. Also, it's Hydrocity, Team Hydrocity. Meanwhile, Sonic Mania is over here overcompensating like Lord Farquaad. Oh my goodness. I don't want to talk trash on this song at all. Love the track here. But where does it get off thinking it deserves this song? like what is it doing to warrant it popping off this hard? The level sure isn't. Let's look at what came before it again. No. It doesn't deserve this. It's nothing. Okay, but I take it all back. It's 100% worth it just because it starts with Knuckles getting knocked off the plane. That's hilarious every time. I would also complain it eats up one of the very few original level acts with something copying another level from the past, but Knuckles actually has his own entire stage exclusive to him down wherever he fell. And something about this stage doesn't feel real to me, and maybe it's just because I only ever played it once until this video, but I think it has a different vibe than the rest of the game. It's really not a very straightforward level. No one particular thing blows me out of the way about it, but I also really like that it feels like I'm actually searching for the exit. It gives me a similar feeling to the treasure hunting in Sonic Adventure 2. Just aimlessly wandering around and enjoying the aesthetics and music is the fun part of Knuckles' gameplay, and Mania doesn't have the focus on A ranks ruining the entire vibe like SA2's treasure hunting does. I said earlier a lot of the exploration doesn't click with me in this game because what you can find generally doesn't feel that substantial for me, but not having any idea where I am and just roaming around looking for the exit with Knuckles' chill flight and wall climbing abilities just works. Maybe it's just a novelty of not having played this level as much as the rest, but this is one case where the vibe alone is working for me, which is kind of ironic because the Sky Chase copy is the level that's supposed to be about the vibe, but I guess Knuckles did just get vibe checked off the play, and so it all checks out. The only thing that's kind of iffy is near the start, you actually die if you follow this barrel, which was a shock as I don't think any other barrel like this does that. I didn't realize that this was the bottom of the stage, you know. But besides that, I also like that it can easily be a level where you spend upwards of 4 minutes on getting fully immersed in it. Or if you master it, you can finish it in around just a single minute. Also, this jump you could do at the end is hot stuff. I really like this big chasm in the level map too. The stage actually has a big focus on climbing to the top, the end goal being up here on the top right. Almost getting into some Knuckles Chaotix territory in a way with its vertical oriented stages. It's fun stuff, and even the fight isn't too bad. It's nothing wild, he just stands there throwing pieces of his body at you, and it's not that hard to dodge, except if he catches you off guard by surprise by not bouncing it. But getting as many hits as you can early as you can works well enough. Act 2 is actually like the smallest level in the game. Interestingly, if you're playing as Knuckles, you actually start up here, so that's some fun continuity between levels, but nothing really happens for the first major chunk of the stage. It's kind of barren actually, which is kind of concerning considering how short this stage is. You can push these barrels and fall through the floor, one of them leads to a special ring. The level gimmicks here thankfully feel good to use well. Popping into these star pinata things and then adding onto your existing momentum is pretty cool. The chairs end up throwing you in the direction you were moving if you stay on them long enough, or you can jump off early, which is a bit of a risk because if you jump off and he's going the wrong way, then you're just going to fly in the wrong direction. Really, it's honestly faster just to ignore them. These guns are similar to the cannons in Starlight Zone in that a good shot feels really good, but it's kind of blind, unless they give you a ring trail to aim for, which they do sometimes here. I almost want to say what's here is good. It's got a lot of potential slope jumps, and going fast in this stage is actually satisfying, but I think it's a bit too straightforward for how short of a level it is. On a casual run, it's kind of in one ear out the other, nothing special happening. It has some satisfying speed to it at parts though. Getting a good launch through this section feels amazing as it can be a huge choke spot, and even if you do get the good launch out of that section, there's still some tension because if you run past the only exit, you'll run up to a dead end. You have to climb this tree to get out of the area. There's nothing past it. These piano walls bouncing you back and forth on your way down feel good to get let out at the correct side. The left is just a dead end with a special stage ring. A lot of attempts to find other pathways did yield results, but ultimately I was finishing the stage faster the less I tried, to be honest. It's satisfying enough to go fast in the stage to not completely write it off, because that's the most important part, I think. If going fast isn't fun, then what's the point? It definitely still feels like it has the issue of hitting a skill ceiling pretty fast, so I'm not going back to it all the time. But it's not too automated, and despite being mostly very linear, it's got enough depth to not be boring. Plus, it's kind of impossible for it to overstay its welcome, being a little over a minute long. The boss is a fun reference, and I want to like it a lot more than I do, but it doesn't amount to much more than stun locking it repeatedly with a pretty lame pace since you can only hit it once per transformation. You're watching it transform more than you're actually fighting it. I feel like the boss could have been much better paced and more interesting if the transformation was faster and more dynamic. Maybe he'd zip to a random part of the screen and start attacking you from there, and you'd have to reach him. This would have given him a chance to actually attack you and possibly even speed up the fight, and for sure would have given his different forms chance to actually shine and show you what he can do. But as it is, it's the equivalent of some kid dropping Iggy into an empty rectangle in Mario Maker, with the rings mechanic almost acting like an infinitely respawning mushroom at that. I was actually pretty excited to see Oil Ocean was picked for this game. Nice to see a pick that's not just one of the default fan favorites, and Act 1 is pretty faithful to the original, and to me that's a good thing. The enemies are just as effective in the original, meaning they're actively in your way and you have to deal with them constantly, and it's super rewarding to get past them with no trouble. The design is open enough to make Knuckles and Tails feel pretty good to play even. Generally speaking, a lot of levels don't really take advantage of Tails and Knuckles. Your playthrough through them is largely unchanged. If a level's too automated, or if it locks you in a linear hallway, climbing and flying don't really come into play. I like being able to skip some of the elevator rides by jumping up high enough to hit the fans, and it's cool how it interacts with each individual character because Sonic has to jump up high enough to reach it. Tails of course could fly there, and it's a little harder with Knuckles since he doesn't jump as high as Sonic. This level uses these slides a lot, and in a lot of levels in this game I feel like these would just be watching Sonic slide repeatedly over and over again. But in this stage, they use the slides in very smart ways. You can climb them with Knuckles or the fire shield, or if you're just leading into another slide, you kind of want to cancel your momentum a bit to continue going down as fast as possible. So even in these sections where you can really just hold nothing and you'll continue just fine, there's still a higher effort, faster way to do it, and I appreciate that. You could jump off the wall some of them lead to, jumping between a gap off of one. If you spin dash here, you can reach a higher path by just blasting up there. I think this level has a really good use of the original Oil Ocean's ideas. They just take what was there originally and get a lot out of it, and they did great with that. The boss is pretty dumb though. If you don't kill him instantly, he'll raise the floor and you'll probably die the first time because he completely blindsides you with spikes that instantly kill you from crush damage up here. But at least he's able to kill you, and that technically puts him above most bosses in the game, to be honest. But no, questionable instant kill attack aside, he just kind of floats there and lets you wail on him, and he's dead before anything happens, really. He might throw his wrench at you at most, but hey, I've got generally positive feelings towards this stage. And when writing this, I almost skewed a bit more negative because something felt missing from it, but I think I realized that's probably just a result of it not having a very impressive Act 2. To start positively though, I do like how Act 2 uses these bits where you're supposed to stop and push on the spring that slams out to push you up, especially because the game knows you have no reason to really use them, but there's some really nice wall jumps that feel good to hit, and you're even rewarded with a fire shield very early on for doing it. You could just jump over and not do the wall jump, but that's like a whole second slower and doesn't look as cool, don't be lame now. And keeping the fire shield the whole stage is very helpful, though it does nullify the enemy's projectiles, hurting their effectiveness that I actually liked. But I don't know, something about Act 2 just feels like more of Act 1 but worse. I appreciate them making the acts so distinctly different from each other in this game, because on the surface there's not much difference between acts in Sonic 2, but I think 2 made the difference clear in the level design itself. Mania chooses to throw in a standout gimmick usually, and it's more memorable for sure, but it's just kind of a fleeting attempt at being more interesting in my opinion. Was Oil Ocean really made more interesting because you can run across these subs and slowly fade to black as you jump into them, only for a tiny distraction before you fade out to the main level and see the sub coming out of the oil before being launched out? Hey, the pulleys from Sandopolis are here, and I actually like this gimmick in Sonic 3 because the ghosts are genuinely kind of a threat and they keep the tension high, even in sections that are otherwise not very tense. But here you only slowly lose rings one at a time, and it doesn't even kill you when you're at 0. Sure, being at 0 rings is a scary position to be in, to be fair. The enemies are very capable in Oil Ocean, even if their placements are a bit less effective in this act, but it's just not very effective, as the level's not long enough for a mechanic like this to really make much of an impact, especially if it's almost entirely just a visual thing. I just think there's not really a scenario where it really does anything. So frequently you'll just be thrown directly into a pulley. My route through this level here just pulls this one because it wastes almost no time to do so, and I don't really bother with them for the rest of the level. Cause by the time I start losing rings, I'm near the end anyway, and the last stretch of this level just entirely gives up on its design, so it's not like the impaired vision changes much. You just jump up here and hold right and run across the whole sub with a tiny rectangle to jump over as the only thing in your way. Like, yeah, it's vaguely kind of hard to see if I don't grab the pulleys that are littered all over the place, but I don't even feel like I need to see. I just grab the speed shoes hidden here and just mindlessly jump ahead. The appeal of Oil Ocean was hitting the cycles on the green platforms. The enemies were placed in effective locations. How failure to make jumps would send you lower and lower into the level until you're in the oil, which was sometimes hard to get out of in the original game even. Remember, I praised Mania's Act 1 of Oil Ocean because it took the existing Oil Ocean ideas and concepts and actually got a lot out of them, but it seems to me like Act 2 just uses those exact same ideas and drops them in without a second thought, and the interesting part is supposed to come from the gimmicks they slapped on like a band-aid. Everything that was fun about Act 1 is just replaced with a gimmick that can't really take hold, because it's a gimmick lifted from a level in Sonic 3 that could easily last 6 to 8 minutes. That doesn't translate super well when you not only make the punishment for ignoring it less impactful, but also it just can't take into effect much in a level that's under 2 minutes long. It just doesn't have a strong core focus. And oh boy, I love covering these ones. It's another stage that opens up with alternate paths that are just pick a path style, nothing interesting about them really. You can either go left or right here, and both have very similar level design and let out where you'll find the speed shoes at generally about the same time as each other. It feels so superfluous. Bleh. But if you jump over both entrances, you go here, and the only difference in design compared to the other two paths is just that this one, you go inside of a sub for a few seconds before popping out and going through the exact same level design seen in other paths. Honestly, I'm struggling to wrap up my thoughts on this act for some reason. It's not a horrible stage really. I'd honestly say it's one of the better ones, relatively speaking. This level is just one of those cases where both the speedrun and the casual playthrough are both just as boring. On a casual playthrough, you'll be going through a lot of these subs, and every single one of them is trash. Like, they just needlessly extend the length of the level. Like, there's this one literally like 2 seconds away from the ending, if that. Like, what's the point here? Why was this even added? Like, you could see it as like a little secret thing, like a little item box, like who cares? Like, I just don't get it at all. Like, you can play through the entire level without going into one of these subs, which is good, because I don't like the subs. Like, half the time the transition to get in and out of the sub is longer than the time you even spend in the sub itself. They're so small with such straightforward level design. Point is, this makes the route that you take through the level very binary. Like, oh, this is the route you go through when you're new at the game or just aren't speedrunning or whatever. Like, oh, you'll go through all these subs on your first playthrough. But now that you know, oh, if I go here, I'll beat the level a whole minute 30 faster or whatever. It's just like the Sonic 3 levels I was complaining about. Like, oh, this one, you go here, you'll get like a top 100 time. If you go the other way, though, the level's gonna drag on, and it's just boring either way, I think. Cause, like, that's why I like the first Oil Ocean and Sonic 2 in general. I keep harping on it and bring it up, but like, in Sonic 2, the level design was very skill-oriented. Like, if you stayed on the fast paths, you'd go fast. You beat the levels fast. And that was fun. What's the point of having such a significantly faster path in like a pick a path level? Like they aren't interweaving or interconnected or anything like that. It's just, this is a slow path. This is a fast path. Choose one. Okay. It doesn't help that like all the paths converge onto the same path like halfway through, and then everything from there is extremely straightforward and barren. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that just because a level is very straightforward and linear means it can't be good, right? Like, there are plenty of examples of very linear Sonic levels that are good. They don't have to be like some wacky interconnected thing like I keep babbling about, you know. Thing is, if it's not inherently an interesting level through the design of the level itself, that has to be made up somewhere else in a different area. So what I'm getting at, especially in a stage that is this close to the end of the game, if the level itself isn't going to be interesting, like if staying on a route, getting on the right route, etc. is not interesting, then they have to make the obstacles in the route that you're going meaningful enough to be substantial. But the problem is this game does not have the guts to be remotely challenging in any circumstance. And I feel like they knew this. That's why the screen starts getting all foggy and you start draining your rings. It's a band-aid fix, like I said earlier. It's just a thing they slapped on to try to disguise how frankly empty this level is. Enemies aren't as effective, design begins feeling repetitive at points, especially because the slides aren't used as interestingly as Act 1, cycles aren't nearly as important, the last major chunk of the stage is almost entirely empty, alternate paths don't amount to much, there's practically no platforming, like at all. But hey, if you skip all the pulleys we throw you directly at, then you'll lose one ring at a time very slowly. Is that enough to carry a level?
New record!
I will say the boss is fantastic though. It takes the pretty dull Sonic 2 fight and makes it an actual threat. Instead of Eggman sheepishly floating up to give Sonic a little chance to kill him like it's some game, he bursts out with a giant octopus and you can destroy its hands to eliminate part of his attack, or you can just focus on the giant head and go for the kill faster. Of course, I heard the tons of Sonic fans hating this boss because bosses where you can die are looked down upon in the fanbase, but they really did a good job updating the source material to be more interesting here. So, it's a pretty good Act 1, a meh Act 2, and a great boss. Generally pretty happy with Oil Ocean's representation in this game, I just think Act 2 drops the ball on following up where Act 1 left off, which is why, like I said, I almost went for a more negative take on Act 1 because it just felt like something was missing. But it's just because Sonic 2 was so smartly designed, I feel, that essentially to me cutting out the second half of Oil Ocean kind of leaves the first act high and dry, just kind of alone awkwardly there, just as half of a level to me. And that's my only issue with Act 1, is that Act 2's bad, so. Moving on, a much easier level to cover, Lava Reef. It's honestly one of the most boring zones in the entire series for me. What you see with this level is what you get. It's incredibly linear and uninteresting. It does have a fire shield early on, but I don't find its use as interesting here as in Flying Battery, as it's much easier to keep throughout the whole level, and the level is just all around even more straightforward and boring than Flying Battery was. There's a few very brief sections where you can deviate off the main path and get a few rings, and I know people like exploration in these games, but to me, just randomly place item boxes and rings slightly off the main course is not the appeal of exploration in a Sonic game. The appeal is finding a faster method or a more fun way through a level, but springing up here from an invisible spring and getting a handful of rings, and then going back down to the main path just does nothing for me. If it was Sonic 1 where the rings and lives were more important due to the special stages needing 50 rings, game overs, and it being a relatively difficult game, it would work, but I literally could not care less about my ring count in Mania. But getting into more detail, I do like these pink dino lads in the lava. Bouncing off their heads to progress is fun, and being able to stand on their back is cool. I think they could have designed a lot more around them, and it probably would have led to a more interesting level had they been used more. But instead, they choose to spam these hermit crab things that blow up, except they take so long to do they may as well not even be there. They put these yellow buttons next to the doors all the time, and I don't understand why. There's never any design behind it. Run up to the door, see yellow button, touch yellow button. This is an identical interaction to what you'd find in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. I don't know what to call these things, but whenever you see one, all you do is stand on it and spin dash to progress. Another worthless binary interaction this level uses repeatedly. These boring staircases they also use repeatedly. I just really don't like how a lot of Sonic 3 stages come up with a super boring quote-unquote mechanic and just reuse it over and over again to pad out an excessively long level that goes nowhere. So there's almost nothing resembling alternate paths, there's weak rewards for exploration, extremely boring level gimmicks, and to top it all off, it's filled with empty ground pretty often. Generally speaking, there's two types of levels in this game that I have an issue with. First, there's the really heavily automated ones, or second, there's ones that are not really exactly automated, but they're still extremely linear and boring and just completely brain dead easy. Progression is just mindless. This level combines both of them. Not only is it extremely linear, it's also extremely automated at the same time. At least Studiopolis had the decency to pretend it was a complicated level, especially so early into the game you'd be forgiven for not really finding anything wrong with it. Honestly, I'm just very sick of this game, so I hate it. But like, there's no reason to hate Studiopolis straight off the bat, honestly. But this level's just right in front of you. Garbage. It's nothing. It's just an exhausting stream of nothing. At least Chemical Plant Act 2 and Studiopolis are jiggling the keys in front of my baby face, but this level assumes I've already fallen asleep for my 30-minute nap, as evidenced by this boss who almost literally kills itself. It's basically just the Mystic Caves boss in Sonic 2, except even less effective at killing you, and you're forced to sit through 3 cycles before it can be damaged. So it's just a boss that already exists in the older games, except now it has bad pacing. Cool? Anyway, Act 2 is largely the same. The introduction splits off here, but almost immediately comes back together. It's just there to give you a fire shield. There's these cubes you stand on that float across the lava, but it's not even worth the effort. Just damage boost through all of it, who cares? It's got a lot of these sections that just feel very samey, as the previous level also used this exact level design repeatedly. Those bits where you just run to the right, and then run to the left, and then back to the right in these largely empty sections. Throw in the opening doors idea again and slow-moving platform to progress, and you really have a level trying to fight for the most boring Sonic stage possible award. It even brings back the stomping metal feet from the previous stage, as though that was any fun to use. I didn't even mention them, actually. You just step on them repeatedly, and then they walk forward. like whatever. This just feels like the same level as the last one, but now it has fittingly low energy music and even more slow and blocky design than before. Also, this is as good a time as ever, I guess, to complain about instant death crushing. It's been in the series since the beginning and I don't hate it inherently, but seriously, the only time I ever die in this game is by spin dashing ahead and getting crushed by something, which despite hazards like that existing in Sonic 1 and 2, it's really only Sonic 3 and Mania it ever happens in. It's not common enough for me to really harp on it, but it just feels lame when it happens. Like, the entire purpose of the rings mechanic is to stop Sonic from turning into Bubsy where you die in one hit. It gets rid of the trial and error nature of a fast-paced 2D platformer. I don't mind them using crushing as a punishing hazard. I actually really like crushing. When it's used well, just like bottomless pits, they create a more dangerous hazard that forces you to be careful. This is good to have since the rings are so forgiving by nature. But these blocks near the start don't even accomplish anything design-wise. I already don't like these blocks before I was punished for rushing ahead in a game where that's all you do 95% of the time. And I know some people are going to hear this and go, oh, so he complains when it punishes you for careless play, but then he complains when it's automated. What a whiner, he doesn't even know what he's saying, he contradicts himself. But that's kind of besides the point. The actual obstacles in the level look like this. So how about we have some real hazards instead of just putting random moving blocks in the middle of nowhere for no reason other than the level needs to be longer? Or at least has some consistency. The quality of the level design fluctuates so wildly in this game. Anyway, sorry about the tangent, but I really don't have that much to say about this level. It's more of the same. Anyway, the boss in this level is actually fantastic. He has multiple different attacks, and all of them are pretty effective despite being telegraphed. Timing and spacing your jump to actually hit the robot instead of the Buzzy Beetle requires some effort, and it actually needs some practice to be able to beat it fast. He's most vulnerable when he's spinning the spike chain above his head, and you have to hit the middle because the spikes obviously hurt you, and the beetle just bumps you back. Sometimes when he's off screen, there's an audio cue to tell you he's about to charge, and you can hit him in the middle of the charge, risking a Tails versus Knuckles interaction. He'll jump up here and do a little trick, and it's charming and it fills the middle of the screen with confetti and fire. It's a very fun and well executed boss. This fight I hear is actually a reference to a guy who went by Polygon Jim, who sadly passed away almost a decade ago. Yeah, he was very prominent in the Sonic hacking community, and one of his hacks was this Motobug in Sonic 1, where you play as the Motobug through the whole game. And I think they did his creation here a lot of justice, and it's a very sweet tribute. So yeah, I'm really happy to say I actually really like this fight. They did great on it. It's easily one of the best bosses in Sonic in general of all time, I think, in my opinion. Thankfully, I get to follow up a great boss with a great level, and this level has a lot of what I love about 2D Sonic design. The whole thing is built off of this top path being fast, but hard to stay on. These diagonal slopes, some of which have springs and some don't, play great with different momentum scenarios. Near the start, a lot of them are against you, creating a great risk and reward set of jumps, making it hard to go fast without falling to the lower paths, but incredibly satisfying when you nail it. And later on, there's some that you want to lean into for a boost. There's really fun jumps like these between two diagonal slopes over a hole, and if you fall in the hole, then it leads to a slower path. And making the jump itself is actually really satisfying. I just found myself going for faster and faster times in this level while recording for this video just because it was such a fun stage. And that's despite the fact that I had to essentially play through the game like 3 to 4-ish times for this video alone. Really, the only thing I'm not a huge fan of is these bits where you step on the catapult and wait for it to fling you to the background or foreground. The background sections they take you to don't tend to be very interesting in their design and are really short. This part where you come to the foreground and land immediately on another catapult looks like it's going to be an attention check type thing, where if you jump off before you get flung back you could take another path, but actually no, the door is actually just the end of a different path and you can't go that way, so it's kind of pointless. Depending on your path though, you can actually avoid almost all of these, so they're really not that bad. They just kind of remind me how mediocre the game's level design and gimmicks usually are in a level that's otherwise absolutely nailing the classic Sonic formula. Also, this bomb guy is pretty cringe. Like, why would they put this enemy you can't kill and damages you from all sides in front of a ledge with no way to jump over it? I guarantee like 90% of players damage boost through this guy every time they play this stage. The alternative is to sit there and wait for it to despawn, basically. It just blows up after a while. The boss of this stage is a near copy-paste of Sonic 1's final boss, except halfway through his machine malfunctions and just rapidly attacks wildly. I don't think the first half really transitions well into a fight that lets you bring rings into it, plus your spin dash kind of nullifies it a bit since now the electrical balls try to home in on you, ironically making it actually easier than ever to dodge. But the second phase is fun enough as a subversion of the boss, I guess. It's nothing too crazy, but it's alright. Act 2 of this zone does have some elements that I really liked from Act 1, but unfortunately gets lost in the sauce a bit. The sauce, of course, being style over substance gimmicks, kind of like Oil Ocean 2. It's not all bad though, as I'll never say no to a gimmick that actually interacts with your momentum and adds depth to a level, like these spinning wheels. What loses me a bit though is the tiny Sonic sections being pretty weak. These spinning platforms that put you in the background, I don't even understand why they're here. At most, you'll have to jump over some spikes that are slightly harder to see than usual, and then you'll just flip back to the foreground. It's kind of pointless to me. Falling spike pit moment. Falling spike pit moment 2. The level ends up spending more time on these dull gimmicks than leaning into the more fun design found in the first act, despite that very same design being present in areas of this level. So thankfully it's not unsalvageable. The optimal speedrun route does avoid pretty much all of the issues I have. The tiny Sonic sections are generally pretty blocky and shallow, but if you beat the level in under a minute, they don't really overstay their welcome. It's not a horrible stage if you learn the speedrun, but otherwise it's a sharp decline in quality from the first one. The boss is pretty cool though. You dictate the difficulty and pacing of the fight yourself because every time you jump into the spinner, it spawns one of the 3 miniature bosses from previous games, Amy Rose of course being the most deadly. Fun references and a pretty difficult achievement attached to it that requires you to let all 8 out at the same time before destroying any of them, and gameplay that grows with your skill level. I love it. Now finally here we are, the final level, Titanic Monarch. Does the game end on a high note? Not really. Act 1 at least has its fair share of automated sections, and it's extremely linear with a lot of pretty empty design, and these orbs from Sonic 3's bonus stages don't make for a level mechanic that the game can rely on for level design as much as it does. I think the intention behind this level was for it to be like threatening. Like, it does have a lot of hazards and enemies thrown in there. The achievement for beating the stage without getting hit once is actually somewhat difficult, though of course you can just cheese it with Supersonic. But for a stage whose entire design is strictly about trying to kill Sonic, there sure is a surplus of rings constantly thrown directly in your path. I can see this being a genuinely somewhat tense level if they just had the confidence to leave you a little bit short on rings. Maybe even force you to go out of your way for some. The few times this level branches out is for like a shield or a box of rings anyway. Like, make that the only rings you get, you know? The orbs they use all over the place just amount to more of the point Sonic in the right direction and press jump type gameplay. The timing isn't remotely difficult to get right either, they just really bore me. These cars you jump into have some nuance built into the mechanics, and that you can jump out early and keep the momentum from the car instead of hitting the wall and being stunned until you land. At one point, if you do it, it'll take you to this tiny corner that has a chaotix ring thing that makes you drop big rings worth 4 when you get hit next. I really don't get it. Otherwise, doing this saves like half a second otherwise, really. I don't really have much more to say. It's kind of anticlimactic. The boss is another one of those bosses where the pace is generally dictated by you, so the faster you try to beat it, the more difficult it is, and I always appreciate that. Even if it is one where it's fastest just to damage boost through it, at least in this case, doing so is fairly dangerous. The second phase isn't that great, but I guess it's a bit scary if you ran out of rings from damage boosting in the previous phase, so I think it works out. But that's about it for this act. Like, otherwise, it's a lot of just automation. Like, look at this. It's empty design, enemies that don't kill you because they spam rings at you, whatever, you know? But the final level surely has to be better though, right? Eh. The big gimmick in this level is that there's 4 sections that you can choose to do in any order after getting to this small hub in the middle. The design actually getting there is so pointless that may as well not be there, but once you are there, I went to the bottom left one first. Another pointless car guy later, you actually get to the meat of the area, which can be kind of confusing and difficult to pass at first, because if you fall, you get teleported back to the start, and the spinning platforms don't stop spinning, and they won't really line up very cleanly either. I always just spin dash from up here, which gets you past the whole section though, leaving the rest of this corner section to being almost entirely automated.
Woo! My favorite! Woo! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Look at him go!
With some pointless purple orbs at the end for good measure. Bottom right portal, here we go. It's genuinely shocking what this game is allowed to get away with. I'll just say that. That's this whole section. Top left has a funny section that actually confused me at first. It's disguised itself as another automated bit, but it actually is just sending you in circles. You have to jump up out here to break out of it. And I was so trained by this game to just let it take me where I'm going that I didn't notice it and ended up being lost and making my way back to the start in my first recording. So I love that. Otherwise, the rest of the corner doesn't leave much of an impact. More shallow uses of the car for some reason, automated sections, purple orbs, etc. I like these moving platforms. They're like an actually interesting version of these sections from Sonic 1. Getting crushed in them if you're not careful is pretty likely, especially on your first playthrough. They may throw you off. They're not that threatening on repeated playthroughs, but they're at least quick and something that isn't automation. You know, top right corner immediately starts off with them, but this time you go down. Some springs that pop up out of the walls to jump across, and you might be kind of lost for a second because they don't pop out of the wall until you're already falling on them. So that's something, I guess. Otherwise, it's just more purple sphere jumps and the big portal in the middle of the hub opens. And then when you jump in, this section starts with a bunch of spikes, but then there's dudes underneath blowing their air at it, so you hover over all the spikes, and then goal. That's it. I gotta say, it's weird how much of this level is clearly trying to pretend something was happening, yet it still came out being one of the most automated, dull ones of the bunch. It's like the game's mad at us, the baby, for not falling asleep yet, so it aggressively shakes the keys this time. The end boss is like a Sonic CD tier boss in ways, and decent in others. The CD aspects come from it being more difficult at the start, but getting easier the more you hit it, because it loses these electric tentacles the more you hit him. Which isn't actually a horrible idea to get your ring count lower for the later half of the fight, and ease up a bit when you're likely in more danger of dying. The fight is decent. I kind of wish the bits where you teleport and fight the hard-boiled heavies one last time was more fleshed out though. As it is, sometimes I don't even know what's going on before they're over and I'm back to Eggman. If you hit them a couple times, their sections end earlier, I guess, otherwise they end on their own shortly later. It's not particularly amazing, but it is a boss that is capable of killing you, which by default makes it one of the best bosses in the game. If you got all the emeralds, there's a supersonic fight, and I like that the hard-boiled fella is able to actually damage Sonic and make him lose rings despite his super form, but only if you get hit by his little weird like circle beam thing. Whereas all Eggman can do is push you around. It's always been interesting theorizing whether Supersonic taking damage in previous games was just Sega being inconsistent, or if it was an intentional choice to say the boss is just that powerful that it can hurt Supersonic, like the final boss in Unleashed is able to actually hurt Supersonic, whereas all Perfect Chaos can do in Sonic Adventure 1 is push him back. So it's cool to see an idea that utilizes both ways to show, yeah, extremely powerful attacks can still hurt Supersonic. The fight itself isn't that great, the music and aesthetics really carry it, and the theme of Eggman fighting with the robot is fun. You really just float around picking up rings one at a time, waiting for either Eggman or the robot to come in so you can bump into them and wait for the other to come in though. If you start running low on rings, it is pretty tense as you can only really get one ring at a time. It's a pretty cool implementation of Supersonic's ring limitation there, but really the fight's only hard if you use the dash button, which instantly eats up 10 rings. And it just ends up feeling like a beginner's trap. Like, oh, you were trying to figure out the controls and you found a dash button that isn't remotely necessary to use, and it uses up a huge chunk of your draining ring count? Lol. This is where my commentary for the boss ended originally, but I had to go back and record some footage because I could not find the footage of this fight. My computer is a mess, as you saw earlier in the video. After I'm done with this, I'm gonna like nuke it or something. Like, I can't do this again. Anyway, just adding this little bit here, because on my last playthrough I realized you can literally just stand in the middle of the room completely still, and it's much easier of a fight. Like, I already thought this fight was kind of lame and uninteresting, but if you stand still on the floor, the rings kind of just come to you, so you're not really in danger anymore. Like, at least if you're flying around, you can, like, start running low on rings, maybe, especially if you're getting hit by that one attack. This turns the fight into literally just breaking through his little orbs, which that's all it was to begin with, but when you're not being knocked away in the air every single time, you can just repeatedly jump into him. By standing on the floor here, it lets you treat this boss like any other boss in the game, mindlessly jump into it at most, or just stand there waiting for it to slay itself. Like, what a fitting end to this game. A boss where you just stand there waiting for it to end, basically. Anyway, the ending is probably the least impactful, most anticlimactic one in the series. If you don't get all the emeralds, you get the bad ending, where you win, and Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles stand there watching the planet, presumably get freed, though it's off camera. I don't really know what else it could be. They all look pretty content looking at whatever they're looking at. And really, I don't even know what this planet is doing here. But bright light and Sonic jump towards the screen, roll credits. The good ending, though, is the exact same thing, except this time we actually see the planet be freed, and Sonic is teleported directly into Sonic Forces. So really, this is the bad ending. Original joke, I know. I'm honestly gonna harp on this a little bit. Sonic 1 had a simple feel-good ending, nothing special, but it works for such an old game, especially for when the series had almost no characters or world building. And they had this little bit where Eggman would juggle the emeralds in front of you and be like, haha, try again if you didn't get all of them, just to encourage you to play it again. It was something, some sort of emotional response. I actually totally forgot, but Eggman totally does this in this game too. I don't think it has the exact same meaning though, because Sonic 1 was more like an arcade experience. Like every time you play it, you're going to be going for the emeralds if you want this good ending, if you don't want Eggman to taunt you at the end. Sonic Mania is like a much longer game where you're going to be having save files, blah blah blah. You're not going for these emeralds every single time you play the game, you know. You just do it, and if you didn't do it the first time, well, all you have to do is level select, play like for another 5 minutes, then you have all the emeralds. You know, it's not like an arcade experience where saying try again really means anything. It's like if at the end of a Zelda game, it was like, haha, you missed one of the heart pieces, try again, idiot. And then after the credits roll, you like walk up to that mini game you forgot to do, then you do it, then you have everything. And then all that changes in the ending is that they don't tell you to try again now. Like, it's completely meaningless here. Sorry, I didn't mean for this bit to like go on into like a whole rant here. I'm just like trying to convey that every single thing in this game feels like such a surface level, like weightless thing. Like even something as minor as this like 5 second animation of Eggman juggling the emeralds in front of you. This is just a meaningless reference because they did that in Sonic 1. But why did they do that in Sonic 1? Because Sonic 1 was more like an arcade game where you can like fail, you lose when if you fail to get all the Chaos Emeralds, which you can fail to do, then he makes fun of you. He's like, haha, stupid idiot, you failed to get all the emeralds. What's he saying in this one? Try again. Try again? What are you talking about, try again? I'll just pick any level, walk to the special stage ring that's sitting there out in the open that has like no barrier of entry unlike Sonic 1's, and I'll just do it, and then I have it. What do you mean try again? And I understand it's literally just here to like get it into your head that something else will happen if you get all the emeralds and beat the game again, you know, just some incentive to do that if you didn't do it originally. I just don't think the try again thing works in a game with save files, but it's not like that big of a deal. I just think the ending is trash in general. I just completely forgot about this bit where Eggman juggles in front of you in this game too. I just had to bring it up because otherwise people would not shut up about it, I'm sure. I prefer Sonic 1's ending. Okay, now let's go to the actual, like, rant. This is like a sub-rant within a rant. Okay, this whole thing was why Sonic 1 has a better ending than this. Now, continue where I left off. In Sonic 2, it helped build Sonic and Tails' friendship as he saves you from falling from space while playing a phenomenal and powerful song. Sonic 3 had a lot of world building and sense of scale behind its finale. Sonic 4 ends with Sonic and Tails floating in the void of space about to hurtle towards Earth, being the canonical ending to the franchise. Mania, though, really, it's nothing. At best, it's a tie-in to Sonic Forces. Woo! Frankly, it would have just been better if the animated cutscene that plays if you stay on the title screen played as an ending instead. Even though story-wise it's an entirely irrelevant thing, it could have worked as a feel-good spectacle in the same way a mediocre animated movie that ran out of plot halfway through ends in a dance party. Howdy, fellas. Instead of just ending it suddenly, be like 2 hours of me just talking at you and then just like, okay, that's it, bye. I feel like it'd be a good idea to like do a little recap in the form of a tier list. Unscripted, but like I guess let's go into it. But Green Hill Zone, I think they did really good with this stage. Like about as good as you can do with Green Hill Zone. Like I don't want to like downplay it, but like at the end of the day, it is Green Hill Zone. You know, like. But Act 2 especially, I think they did really good at updating it and having new stuff. So I think they did great for it. It's just not like I'm not going to be replaying a Sonic game over and over again because it has a good Green Hill Zone, but as far as this game goes, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, it's good just in general, honestly, not just for this game standards. Where the heck is Chemical Plant? There it is. Act 1 is pretty faithful to the original, which, in the context of this game, doesn't really mean it's a good thing. Because Act 1, like I was saying, it shows you, like, the speeds that you can reach with that little noob trap or whatever, like, kind of being like, hey, there's platforming too. So it's cool that that's there, I think. But in the context of the rest of the game, like I said, a lot of these levels want to be Chemical Plant. And Chemical Plant's only good when you move past it. So an automated level being followed up by more automated levels, well, that first one now no longer has a purpose. But I mean, that said, I like Act 1 well enough. Act 2, I think, really drops the ball, like, really badly, though. There is that mean bean bit, though. Love that. I may move that to B later, but we'll see how the rest of these go. I honestly kind of forget the order some of these are in, but it was Studiopolis next. Very automated. Very automated. That's... like, it's a complicated level, like, objectively speaking. And like I said, there's no reason to hate this level going into it and playing it for the first time. Like, it's a cool level. This is coming from someone who's, like, beat the game too many times. You could say it's even my fault. But, like, if you're analyzing, like, the level design and what's happening, I am sick of it. Like, to me, this level is nothing but music. The music's good and the aesthetics are fun. But I think that this is not very good. I hate the Act 2 boss. I fought that boss so many times before I even started making this video, and then I had to record the whole thing like 4 or 5 times for this video. Oh, I hate the Act 2 boss. It drags. It's complete downtime. Flying Battery. I like the Act 1 speedrun, remember that. If you're speedrunning it, I think it makes really good use of the fire shield. It gives you a lot of movement options that you wouldn't have otherwise, and it's very satisfying to keep for the whole level, and that makes the skill level of the ceiling rise. That's what I'm looking for, like a high skill level that feels like real and tangible, like I don't play the level 3 times and be like, oh, I found what the fastest route is, now I'll just go this way, and now I'm getting a top 100 time just because I went this way instead of that way, you know. I want to be like, hey, if I can keep this fire shield through the whole level, which is kind of hard to do, and utilize it to its fullest extent, which again is hard to do without losing it, then it's actually really satisfying. It's like a tangible goal, like, hey, I want to keep this the whole time, as opposed to Studiopolis, where I'm just like, whatever, dude. Or Act 2, for that matter. Act 2 just drags if you take the wrong path, and is pretty short and meaningless otherwise. What was next? I don't even know. It's probably something like Hydrosity. No, Hydrosity's way later for some reason. I don't know why that's such a late game stage. I'm probably gonna do these out of order, whatever. Press Garden, I really like this level. Like, Act 1 doesn't leave a huge impression on me, but it's likable. It's a likable level. Act 2 is really good. I actually went into this video saying, like, Green Hill Act 2 is the best level in the game. I'm about to actually go back and re-record some of the stuff earlier in the video, because as I replayed the game for the video, there's a few stages I'm like, you know, this is pretty good. Pretty happy with it. So Press Garden, genuinely just a flat-out good level. I liked the Act 2 boss. Act 1 boss was mid. Not great, yeah. Just damage boosting like usual. But yeah, this is the kind of level I would love to see. Like, this is what I'm replaying these games for. Metallic Madness Act 1 is also on that tier. Act 2, I think, brings it down a little bit, but I do love Act 1. And again, it's just, like, anything that's, like, cool and not Green Hill Zone is immediately better than Green Hill Zone. Like, like, if Act 1 of Green Hill Zone's cool, great. You made a functional game, you know? Hydrosity Zone, mind-numbingly boring. Act 1, same problem as Flying Battery, just go this way and it's so fast. Go other ways, it drags. So bad. So bad. So bad. Act 2, though, completely automated. Like, it's just the 1-2 switch of bad levels. But is it better than Flying Battery? It is not better than Flying Battery. Actually, in fact, I'll put Flying Battery in C, just because I like the Flame Shield speedrun that much. Mirage Saloon, I went over why the Sky Chase thing is really lame and misses the point of Sky Chase, but I like Knuckles section well enough. Again, it could just be because I haven't played that level that much, but I was vibing with it. It was fun enough. Oh, good thing I'm blocking that. One of my friends has signed in on Battle.net. One of my friends has me playing Overwatch 2 like some sort of heathen. Alright. I don't know how long this is going. 6 minutes or what the heck? I could just talk, dude. Okay, let me speed this up. Oil Ocean, Act 1's very faithful, good ideas. Act 2 just meanders around without adding a whole lot to it. For that, I'll put it there. Stardust Speedway, I don't like Act 1 because I don't think it does a very good job at interweaving its pathways very well. Act 2, I think, feels very fresh every time you play it. It like takes advantage of the chaotic level design. Act 1 just feels like I'm going through the motions somehow, even though it's such a insane level as far as like the routes possible. I don't know. And I don't really care for all the gimmicks in that one either. Titanic Monarch, very, very automated consistently. Does not have the guts to try to be challenging as much as it pretends it will be. Like, every time it hits you, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, have some rings. Don't die, please. You know, whatever, dude. Lava Reef Zone, mind-numbingly boring. Absolutely love the final boss, not the final, the boss of Act 2. Fantastic boss. Otherwise, nothing. I get nothing. Like, who, like, those things that you, like, spin dash on, they, like, the little elevators, like, who does that, like, over and over again, and is like, this is such fun design. Like, I don't know. I don't want to, like, because, like, this whole thing's coming out of, like, a love for the series, and wanting to see it, like, do better, and it's been following, like, the same kind of issues over and over again. So, I don't want to, like, be so negative and be like, who would ever like this? Because obviously a lot of people like it. I don't want to, like, downplay people's experience with the game or whatever if they genuinely think it's great. That said, I'm a little generous putting Stardust Speedway that high, honestly. But so somewhere around here, like, I really like Press Garden. Metallic Madness Act 1 is good enough to be that high. I don't care for Act 2 that much. Green Hill's Green Hill. I enjoy Oil Ocean, Mirage Saloon, and well enough that they have their issues. And then just past that, it's like, I don't really like playing these levels. But I don't know. But before I start rambling, I'll just cut it off here. I'll probably have, like, another, like, little pre-recorded thing at the end or whatever. But yeah, thanks. But yeah, that's Sonic Mania. I'm sorry if this felt a little rambly or unfocused at points. A full analysis of the whole game is a bit of a big project to bite off as a first major video. In the future, I'll likely have topics that are a bit easier to cover, which still includes Sonic analysis. I could be wrong, but I genuinely imagine covering something like Sonic 2 or Sonic Adventure 2 would be way easier and shorter. It's just that Mania takes so much from so many different places, and the quality between levels fluctuates so wildly. I could have just quickly gone in and shown a bunch of examples of the game being automated, but it honestly seems to me like a lot of people are a little bit blinded by this game. Like I said at the start, if you genuinely just find the game relaxing and enjoy just running through some easy levels with S-tier music and seeing all the references, I fully see where you're coming from. I have no ill will against fans of the game or those who made it. Heck, I'd even say the developers did a phenomenal job at making a Sonic game able to have mainstream appeal. That's genuinely not an easy task with this series, and I think they did exactly what they had to do, and clearly it worked, despite my objections. I'm not exactly the target audience, I think. I'm not a kid just getting out of the Sonic movie being curious about the new Sonic game. I'm not someone who harshly criticizes a majority of the series and just wants a return to form. But not a return to form so faithful that it actually takes anything from Sonic 1 or 2, of course. Honestly, this was the only route I can see leading to the success Mania had. I'll save the details for future Sonic discussion videos, but I think it's pretty clear Sega is lost with this series. They're afraid to do anything, and likely lost a lot of their faith in the brand. Decades of bad faith critique will do that. So, even if I say Mania is a heavily dumbed down version of classic Sonic, I understand why it had to be that way, but from my perspective, this is just Sonic 4 Episode 3, and it's not even the best episode. My issue is that you can't seem to criticize the game design without people being completely baffled, so I feel like I really had to go in on the entire game. A lot of Sonic politics has a lot of ties with gaming journalism. Everywhere else, gaming journalism is made fun of to no end, rightfully so, yet it almost feels like people's opinions on this series do genuinely run on statements that at best sound like an interesting narrative. Oh, 2D Sonic game made by fans is better than anything Sonic teams made in decades. Like, that's just a fun narrative to push that a lot of people latch onto. Of course, only for Forces to come out a couple months later and be so bad that it hammers that perception in so hard. And I'd like to just end here, but quick note, Mania was the start of Sega getting a bit scummy with how they're releasing games. Digital only, even the collector's edition only gets you to download code, but once they got the sales they want, only then does it get a physical release. Glad I got one at all, and I wouldn't really be complaining about it, but this did kind of snowball into Sega trying to get people to double dip in increasingly pathetic predatory ways. Sonic Colors Ultimate and now Sonic Origins Collection are really just showing that all Sega learned from Mania's success is that they can get people to buy the same game repeatedly. But that's getting into an entirely separate problem, and I think I've gone on long enough. But yeah, I think it's important to be critical of what you enjoy. It makes the truly exceptional stuff really rise up and gives a lot more perspective to work off of. So many people want Mania 2, saying it's what the series needs, but really, is another low-budget, nostalgia bait quote-unquote return to form project really what the series needs more of? They've been doing this for literally over a decade now. Please, no more. I don't like it, and therefore Sega should listen to me and never make a game like Mania ever again. But seriously, if you made it this far, I appreciate you watching. I'm going to be trying to launch a get-rich-quick scheme by becoming a YouTuber, and this video taking me like a year to write the script for is a good sign. If you're interested in any other thoughts on games I have, Sonic or otherwise, definitely subscribe for more. I'll actually very likely cover some movies and TV shows on this channel too. I barely know how to use Twitter, but I don't know, follow me there and maybe I'll start posting stuff to it. Maybe some like my Mario Maker level codes or something. Have a swell week, and I'll see you next time Sonic fans start posting cringe again, which shouldn't be long at all. And here's where I'd put my Patreon subscribers. If I had any.